Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere that sounds majestic, romantic, and probably smells like boiled leather and damp socks. Before we vanish behind these cold stone walls, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy falling asleep to historically accurate nightmares. And leave a comment with your local time and what you'd name your pet rat if you had to live in a castle. I'll start. Sir bites a lot. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that echoey draft in a hallway vibe. And let's shuffle slowly into the worst Airbnb of the 13th century, the medieval castle. Congratulations! You've just woken up in a medieval castle. No, not as a royal, not even a knight. You, my friend, are a background character. The human equivalent of medieval wallpaper. You're somewhere between a servant, a cousin no one likes, and an unpaid intern who cleans fireplaces with their tears. You live here, technically, but the castle doesn't love you. In fact, it barely tolerates your existence. Your room? It's not a room. It's a section of a hallway near the kitchens, walled off with a few hanging rags and some very hopeful optimism. The stone floor beneath you is so cold, your spine tries to retract like a medieval turtle the moment you touch it. No mattress, just straw. Straw that's been slept on by generations of previous non-entities. Some of it is mouldy. Some of it moves. None of it smells like anything you'd willingly inhale. You sit up, slowly, because sudden motion in this climate is how people throw out their backs before breakfast. Your tunic clings to your body in the damp, sticky way only wool and despair can manage. It smells faintly of stew, smoke, and something that might be mildew, or might be the ghost of a dead kitchen rat. You don't want to know. Above you, a wooden beam drips something. Is it condensation? A leak from the privy chamber above? Blood? No one ever checks. It's been dripping for so long it's considered part of the decor. The locals call it the wet spot and just shuffle their sleeping pallets to avoid it. Medieval feng shui. Your name doesn't matter. You probably don't even have a last name unless you've done something wrong and the guards are shouting it. You're known by your job, which changes daily, and your relative silence. If you're a woman, you're that one who scrubs. If you're a man, you're the lad who reeks less than the pig guy. If you're a child, no one remembers you exist unless you drop a jug or fall in a moat. And yes, there is a moat. It's less of a defensive masterpiece and more of a glorified trench filled with brackish soup water, diseased ducks, and the remains of last week's failed feast. You're not allowed near it unless you're being punished, in which case you get to clean it. With a stick that you whittle yourself, from a tree you're not allowed to cut. You don't live in the castle. You survive in it. You occupy one of the cold, unswept, eternally damp arteries of this giant, echoing stone corpse. It breathes in firelight and exhales mildew. The ceilings are too high to ever feel safe. The walls are too thick for the sun to find you. Everything is either echoing, or groaning, or dripping. Sometimes all three at once. And the air. The air in a castle is a blend of roast meat, old sweat, horse stables, fireplace smoke, and a hint of medieval flatulence that lingers like an unwanted troubadour. It sticks to your tongue. It builds a home in your lungs. Eventually you stop noticing, which is how you know you've truly adapted. Your hands? Calloused, cracked, blackened with soot and grease, and whatever unholy slime lives at the bottom of a stew pot that's never been emptied. Your nails? A crime scene, Soap? A myth? Personal grooming is considered suspicious. If you smell too clean, people assume you've either committed a sin or been sneaking into the bishop's bathhouse. There are others like you. Dozens, maybe hundreds, depending on the size of the castle and the neuroses of the lord who owns it. You pass them in the halls. You don't greet them. There's no time. Everyone's always rushing. Carrying, scrubbing, refilling, stoking, bowing. You exchange glances that say, "Yes, I too am awake at this hour, and aware of the futility of existence." Then you shuffle on. Oh, and you don't wear shoes. Not unless someone's died and you've inherited their pair, which may or may not come with their foot still in it. Most castle dwellers go barefoot, or wear thin, rotting leather soles that exist mostly to catch splinters and collect disease. You can feel every flagstone you step on, every loose nail, every rat tooth. Yes, rat tooth. It's happened before. Your job? Today you carry wood. Tomorrow you carry chamber pots. The day after, if you're lucky, you'll be stirring something in the kitchen that smells like despair and turnips. Or maybe you'll be polishing armour. Not your armour, his armour. Sir drools a lot, the cousin of the Baron who can't aim a sword but owns 3. He once threw a chicken at you. You didn't flinch. That's how dead inside you are. No one speaks to you unless you're being ordered. When they do, it's not your name. It's boy, girl, you, or ugh. If you respond too slowly, you're shouted at. If you respond too quickly, you're suspicious. The perfect servant exists just out of earshot and already knows what to do. You're not that servant, but you're trying, because you enjoy not being whipped. The lord of the castle? You've seen him once, maybe twice. He walked by in a velvet robe so thick it looked like it could deflect arrows. His hair was oiled, his boots were clean. He stepped around a puddle you just made with your own foot blood and didn't even flinch. He does not know you exist. He never will. You're part of the background noise, like fire crackle or peasant coughing. Sometimes, just sometimes, you dream of leaving. You hear tales of the village, open air, fields, pigs you can call your own. But that's just fantasy. You're tied to the castle. Not by chains exactly, but by necessity. You don't own anything. Not your bowl, not your bed, not even the breath you just took without asking permission. The castle gives you shelter, fire, and food. And in return, it owns every second of your time and every cell of your body. You might think that being in a castle comes with protection. Safety. You'd be wrong. The walls are high, yes. The gate's thick. But the enemy isn't always outside. Sometimes it's the steward who blames you for his spilt wine. Sometimes it's the knight who's had too much mead and thinks it's funny to shove you downstairs. Sometimes it's just the stones themselves, slick with moss, waiting to break your leg because you dared to walk too quickly. And if there is a siege, you don't get a weapon. You don't even get a hiding spot. You get assigned boiling water duty or arrow fetching. Congratulations. You're now a target with a soup ladle. You've been here since you were a child. Or maybe you arrived last winter, dragged in after your family froze in a cart outside the gate. No one really asks. Everyone assumes you've always been here. You start to assume it too. The castle absorbs identities. It wears down names. You're not who you were. You're who the castle needs today. And today, it needs someone to carry the Lord's second-best dog's waste bucket down to the privy trench. So that's you. Sleep is brief, fitful, haunted by the sound of footsteps and the soft shriek of rats fighting over bread crusts. You share your sleeping area with 3 others, a kitchen maid, a boy with a limp, and a man named Garth, who may or may not be alive. You don't talk to them. There's nothing to say. You all dream of warmth, silence, and a pillow that isn't a folded tunic stuffed with straw, and betrayal. You don't remember what your voice used to sound like. No one does. That's okay. Voices are for people who matter. And in the castle, mattering is dangerous. It means you're visible. Visible people get noticed. Noticed people get responsibilities. Responsibilities get you killed. So instead, you shuffle. You nod. You keep your head down. You master the art of invisibility. You become the perfect medieval ghost. Not dead, but not quite alive. Somewhere in between. Flowing through corridors of cold stone, listening to nobles laugh about things you'll never understand. But at least you're inside, right? At least you're not in the fields. At least you have a roof. That's what you tell yourself. Every morning. Just before the steward yells your name, or the closest approximation of it, and tells you the Lord's dog has fleas again, and someone has to catch them with their fingers, and you know it's going to be you. You're not the only one barely surviving this place. Castles, as it turns out, are medieval tenement buildings with delusions of grandeur. Every inch is occupied. Servants sleep in storage rooms. Grooms curl up in the stables. Cooks nap standing up beside ovens. And you sleep wherever you don't get kicked. Or stepped on. Or peed on by the Baron's incontinent hunting dog, which, by the way, outranks you. At least 10 people share your wing of the castle, though calling it a wing is generous. It's a narrow hallway with one window the size of your hand, and a door that creaks like it's in pain. There's no privacy. The word doesn't exist yet. You dress under a blanket. You relieve yourself in a pot. You eat with your fingers while someone scratches lice off their belly beside you. There is no me time. There is only we filth. You don't own a mirror. If you did, you wouldn't look into it. Because what's the point? Your reflection is just a wet sock of a human face. Dark rings under the eyes. A mouth that hasn't smiled since the solstice. And hair doing something very avant-garde that might be classified as a public menace in some jurisdictions. Your clothes are shapeless, brown, and permanently moist. The kind of moist that's never fully dry, no matter how long you hang them by the fire. You start your day not when you wake, but when someone kicks your foot and grunts. That grunt could mean get up, you're late, or the Baron wants to hunt and someone needs to hold his arrows and pretend they enjoy it. You've learned to interpret all shades of grunts. You've also learned not to ask questions. Questions get you beatings. Answers get you tasks. Silence gets you survival. By now you've internalised the castle's rhythms. Not because anyone told you to schedule, but because you've memorised the creaks. You know the precise second the kitchen bell rings, which means it's time to chop onions until your eyes look like a plague victim's. You know the sound of the steward's boots, which gives you 6 seconds to pretend you're busy. You know the distant thump of the drawbridge lowering, not because visitors are coming, but because something with hooves is about to enter and poop somewhere you'll have to clean. Castles don't sleep. Even at night there's noise, drunken laughter from the great hall, moaning from the solar, which may or may not be someone dying, wind shrieking through arrow slits, the soft scritch of rodents nibbling on hardtack that was too stale even for the kitchen. Every sound is a warning. Every silence means you missed something. You don't have a door. Doors are for people with rooms. You have a curtain that was once a tapestry, then a rug, and now a barely hanging scrap of fabric that blocks neither sight nor sound, only hope. Behind it, you try to pretend you exist. You curl up in your straw nest, arms wrapped around your knees, and practice breathing quietly so no one thinks you're slacking off by existing too loudly. You don't talk about the nobles, not because you're scared, because you're exhausted. Their problems are baroque and deeply stupid. Someone spilled wine on the wrong velvet. Someone insulted someone else's falcon. Someone wants roast duck, but only if it's stabbed through the left eye before boiling. You try not to listen, but you can't help it. Their lives leak down through the stone like rancid gravy, rich, fatty, and deeply unpleasant. You've seen their children. Small, pale creatures in ruffled linen who throw tantrums over the shape of their bread. You avoid them. They bite. They lie. They have the power to get you whipped just by crying in the wrong direction. One of them asked you once why your teeth look like that. You didn't answer. You just nodded politely and scrubbed the floor harder, using your tears as water. The castle has a chapel. You're allowed to pray there technically, but only if you're invisible, and quiet, and not in the way of someone more important, eternal soul. The priest doesn't know your name, but he knows your sins. All of them. Even the ones you didn't commit. Especially those. He makes you confess weekly, just in case you've secretly wished for comfort or accidentally made eye contact with someone above your station. And then there's the steward. He doesn't walk, he prowls, always appearing at the worst moment. His voice is sharp enough to strip varnish, and he has a supernatural talent for noticing dust where no dust should logically exist. He once berated someone for smudging the stone steps with their presence. You pray not to be assigned to his rotation, but you always are. He remembers faces, especially the unfortunate ones. Your duties rotate. Last week, you were helping in the kennels, where the dogs live better than you. The week before that, you were on spit-turning duty, standing for hours beside a fire so hot it steamed the lice off your chest hair. This week, you're hauling firewood up 4 flights of stairs. Why 4 flights? Because the Baron's mistress likes her fires high, whatever that means. She hasn't acknowledged your existence once, but she threw a fig at your head yesterday, so you're making progress. Sometimes visitors come, important ones. Nobles with travelling parties, and embroidered cloaks and expressions like they have smelled something offensive since birth. When they arrive, the castle turns into a frenzy of preparation. You're suddenly scrubbing walls that no one has looked at in years. You're told to stand straighter, cleaner, quieter, like a human coat rack. If you breathe too hard, someone slaps you with a glove. During feast days, you're allowed to glimpse the illusion of splendour. The great hall is lit with torches. Tables overflow with meats, breads, strange sauces, and things too colourful to be food. You don't eat any of it. You carry it. You plate it. You sneak licks off the serving spoon when no one's looking, and pray the duck liver doesn't kill you. One time, you found a hair in the Baroness's pudding. You were blamed for it. You no longer make eye contact with pudding. The walls are thick, but gossip seeps through. You hear rumours. About wars, kings, marriages, the plague that may be creeping from the south. You try not to care. None of it changes your day. None of it lowers the firewood pile or softens the stew. You've learned that history happens in books. Your life happens on stone steps, in kitchens beneath tables, and occasionally under a collapsing hay cart. Even your emotions have adjusted. You don't feel hope. You feel its second cousin, numb anticipation. You don't laugh. You exhale sharply when something isn't terrible. Joy is a dangerous luxury. The last person who smiled for no reason was accused of witchcraft, and now scrubs pans with their teeth. The only time you feel slightly human is during the early morning shift, just before dawn, when the fires are being stoked, when most of the castle is asleep, when you sneak a moment by the window slit and stare out at the grey horizon. You don't see beauty. You see emptiness, which is almost as good, because it means no one is shouting, yet. And then you hear the bell, the low, dull clang of the morning signal. The castle is waking, which means you're already behind. You get up. You stretch your back, which makes a noise like a dying lute. You throw on your damp tunic, stomp on your shoe to kill whatever was nesting in it, and head toward the kitchens, where a pot of something vaguely edible is already bubbling. You don't eat first. That's not how this works. You eat last. After the nobles. After the guards. After the dogs sometimes. What's left is yours. Usually broth, sometimes bread. Sometimes both, if the gods are feeling merciful. They rarely are, and still you go, because the alternative is outside. And outside means no roof, no fire, no walls. Just cold wind, harder labour, and wolves. At least here the wolves have names and occasionally wear silk. The castle, for all its horrors, is predictable. Predictably cruel, predictably dirty, predictably cold. But there's a kind of safety in predictability. You know what the day will bring. Suffering, yes, but expected suffering. Timetabled agony. You can plan for that. You've built your soul around it. You don't belong here, but you're here anyway. Like a splinter in the wall. Like a draft that never quite goes away. The castle keeps you because it needs you. And it needs you to need it back. At some point, you stop asking yourself who you were before the castle. It doesn't matter. The castle has eaten that version of you. Span it out. Recast you as someone useful. Not interesting, not important, just functional. You used to have opinions, preferences, a favourite food, a least favourite uncle. But all of that has been sanded away by routine. Now your favourite food is not spoiled. Your favourite uncle is anyone who's not yelling. Your only opinion is, please not the latrines again. Because let's be clear, those latrines, they're not bathrooms, they're vertical regrets. Usually built into the castle walls, with a simple hole leading down to whatever open sewer, trench or moat the castle pretends is a plumbing system. You've cleaned one. Once. You still wake up sweating from that memory. You can never truly describe the smell. Words fail. Language gives up. It's not a smell. It's a condition of existence. Your reward for doing these things, for hauling slop, scrubbing stone, dodging lordly tantrums, isn't money. Ha, money. That's cute. No, your reward is continued existence. You're paid in leftover food, a patch of floor to sleep on, and the knowledge that no one's currently trying to remove your spleen for fun. If you're lucky, truly lucky, you might get a tip. A copper coin from a passing noble who felt momentarily whimsical. You won't keep it. The steward will take it. He'll mutter something about it going to the household budget, and you'll pretend to believe him because challenging authority in a castle is a one-way ticket to bruises and missing teeth. Sometimes you imagine running, just slipping out through the postern gate one night and vanishing into the woods. But then you remember, you don't own boots. The woods are full of things with claws and fewer ethics than a drunken knight. And the only people more desperate than castle servants are the bandits who wait outside for castle servants to try escaping. You've known a few who tried. One boy made it 2 miles before wolves made him less than 1. Another disguised himself as a monk, wandered into a village, and was immediately pressed into field labour so soul-crushing he begged to be returned. And they did. The steward welcomed him back with open arms and a bucket of leeches. A lesson was learned. So you stay, you endure, because at least here your suffering has a flaw. A lower limit. You know how bad it can get? The unknown out there. That's worse. Probably. Hopefully. Maybe. The castle changes with the seasons, but never in your favour. In winter, the stone sweats and freezes. You sleep wrapped in rags that still feel like ice. Your breath fogs in the corridor. You pee into a bucket that you empty only when you can feel your own soul start to gag. The fires burn low. Wood is rationed. And you learn that cold has flavours. Bitter, sharp, numb, and the kind that lives inside your bones, like a tiny, vengeful spirit. In summer, the castle becomes a kiln. The stone bakes, as the air sits still, thick with the perfume of sweat, spoiled meat, and cooked rodents. You bake in your tunic. You can't undress. Immodesty is grounds for punishment. So you stew in your own juices. You drink warm beer because the water is unsafe, and the mead is reserved for people with names longer than 1 syllable. You grow used to it. That's the worst part. You grow used to all of it. You stop recoiling at the rats. You stop cringing at the screams. You stop flinching when a lord's hand twitches near his belt. You internalise it all, the rules, the violence, the hierarchy. You become part of the machinery. There's a rhythm to castle life, and it will crush you if you don't move in time. You don't walk freely. You time your steps between tasks, between patrols, between nobles moving from hall to hall. You never cross in front of a feast. You never interrupt a prayer. You never walk past the solar unless you want to risk hearing something that gets you stabbed for eavesdropping. Some people live in castles because they want power. Others because they were born into it. You're here because the world has no better idea for you. You're a placeholder in the divine script. A footnote in someone else's legend. Your hands are always dirty. Not metaphorically, literally. You try to wash, when you can, with what you can. But water is precious, and you don't get the good kind. You get the runoff. The grey, soapy leftovers of someone more important's bathwater. You've washed your face with liquid that was recently acquainted with Lord Gareth's feet. One time, just once, a visiting friar gave you a piece of soap. Real soap. It smelled faintly of lavender. You cried. Then you dropped it. And someone stole it. You never saw it again. You still think about that soap more than your parents. Your body is falling apart. You're not old, technically, but your knees have the consistency of boiled parchment. Your back spasms when you bend. Your skin is a tapestry of bruises, burns, and inexplicable welts. Your teeth? A wreck. One of them whistles when you breathe. You're not sure if that's a problem or just how teeth work now. Medical attention? Funny. You once had a boil. The healer slapped it with a fish and said a prayer. It didn't help. It burst during breakfast the next day and no one even blinked. The castle is full of worse sights, worse sounds, worse smells. There are other kinds of residents here too. The important ones. The ones with titles, swords, and 3 surnames. You see them sometimes. In passing, during feasts, or when you're on torch duty. They glide through the halls like they have never known discomfort. like they assume food simply appears and floors are clean by divine right. But you know better. You are the divine right. They parade in silks and velvets, but you've carried their chamber pots. You've cleaned the vomit out of their boots. You've heard them sob behind tapestries. Seen them bleed into snowbanks after friendly sparring sessions. Power doesn't make them smarter, just louder and more dangerous. Still, you envy them. Their warmth, their privacy, their occasional baths. You fantasize about their beds, their meals, their boots that match. You imagine what it must be like to eat without checking for worms first, to drink something you didn't ladle from a bucket. But you know, deep down, they're not free either. Not really. They're trapped in rules, in alliances, in marriages chosen by distant relatives with more land and compassion. They don't work like you do, but they don't rest either. Their suffering is fancier. Yours is just louder. You used to think of castles as symbols of power. Now you know better. Castles are prisons. Fancy, vertical prisons, where everyone, from the baron to the boy who fetches logs, is doing time. Some in gold chains, some in rags, but all chained nonetheless. And yet, bizarrely, people want to be here. Villagers see the towers and think safety, stability, prestige. They don't see the rats, the bed sores, the child-sized indentations in firewood piles where someone collapsed from exhaustion. They don't hear the arguments, the screams, the sound of a guard's boot connecting with someone's ribs. They only see the stone, the banners, the gate, the fantasy, the lie. You live the reality every day. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the fires are low and no one's screaming, you wonder how long you'll last. How many more winters? How many more latrine scrubbings? How many more missed meals and mystery rashes before you fade into the walls entirely? And if anyone would notice, they wouldn't. The castle would move on, replace you, fill your spot with another wide-eyed, dirt-smeared soul desperate for warmth and too tired to ask questions. But you're not gone yet. You're still here, still breathing, still standing, still waking up every morning with a straw in your hair and a to-do list written in bruises. And somehow, that's enough. You tell yourself stories to get through the day, not the kind with dragons and magic. You don't have the energy for that kind of hope. No, your stories are simpler. 1. Maybe the Baron's favourite hound will bite someone important, and the castle will be shut down for retraining. 2. Maybe you'll be reassigned to the pantry, where it's dark, quiet, and the mice are friendly. 3. Maybe you'll inherit a shirt that doesn't have a hole in the armpit large enough to qualify as a second sleeve. You're not aiming high. You're just aiming for slightly less misery. Sometimes someone new arrives. A cousin of a knight. A disgraced squire. A girl who asked too many questions and was relocated for correction. They look around the castle with wide eyes, still full of questions and energy. You watch them. You study them like a dying man studies a fire. Not for warmth, for proof that it's real. They don't last. Not as they were. They adapt or they break. And you help in the quiet ways. You show them where the dry straw is, where the water runs cleanest, which floorboards creak, which nobles to avoid on feast days. You don't do it because you're kind. You do it because someone once did it for you. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe you just wish they had. Your favourite place in the castle, if you can call it that, is a narrow stairwell between the kitchens and the west tower. It's draughty, cramped. smells faintly of bread mould and something that might once have been cheese. But no one uses it. No one yells there. No one notices if you sit for a moment and pretend the world isn't actively chewing on your ankles. You don't go there often. That would make it suspicious. Suspicious people disappear. But sometimes, just for a minute, you let yourself breathe like a person instead of a gear. You try not to think about the outside world, about the woods, the towns, the festivals, the people who live in cottages with one room, one fire, and one job. It's not better. It's just different. And right now, different is too dangerous a thought. You've learned what happens to those who dwell on different. There's a boy, or maybe he's a man now. You're not sure. His name is Hal, or maybe it was. He used to hum. Not full songs, just bits of melody. In the mornings, while sweeping, while hauling ash. The kind of humming that made you remember there was a world beyond stone. He stopped humming after the steward caught him smiling during morning prayer, said it was inappropriate, said it was distracting, said it invited idleness. Hal hasn't spoken since. Still works, still moves, still breathes, but the music's gone, and in its place, silence so thick it has weight. Like the stone, like the castle. That's how the place gets you. Not all at once, bit by bit, day by day. It shaves off parts of you, your laugh, your voice, your dreams. You wake up one morning and realise you haven't thought about anything beyond the next hour in weeks, months, maybe years. And still, life continues. There's a wedding coming. Not yours, obviously. One of the noble daughters. She's being married off to a lord 2 counties over. You caught a glimpse of her crying behind the chapel. No one stopped. You didn't either. There's nothing to say. She'll leave. You'll stay. Both of you trapped. Just with different wall colours. The castle is decorating, banners, flowers. A pig fattened for the feast. Everyone is pretending to care. You pretend too. You sweep. You scrub. You fetch honey that's mostly bees. You clean the bride's chamber. A room so absurdly luxurious it feels like a joke. You touch the embroidered pillow and wonder what it's like to sleep without waking up sore. Without sharing air with 6 other humans and something that might be a weasel. The wedding is a blur. Music, laughter, food you don't eat. Someone vomits into a tapestry worth more than your yearly labour. Someone else toasts to love while their mistress stands 10 feet away, blinking in Morse code rage. Afterward, the leftovers, and you use that term generously, are dumped in a trough behind the kitchens. You eat what you can grab before the dogs do. Cold meat. Bread soaked in wine. Something that was once fruit. It's the best meal you've had in months. You savour it like a condemned man with a final cigarette. Then it's back to work. Always back to work. There's no end to the chores. Fires go out. Floors get dirty. Nobles make messes faster than physics allows. There's always something to lift, clean, drag, scrub, fix, or bury. Sometimes the tasks blur. You've cleaned the same pot 3 times in one morning because different stewards gave you the order and you didn't want to risk disobedience. Your body adjusts. Your knees forget what upright used to mean. Your shoulders always hurt, but in a way you've come to understand as baseline. Your stomach shrinks. Your hearing sharpens. You can recognise who's coming down the hall by footstep alone. You can tell who's in a bad mood by the way their cup hits the table. You can identify different types of groans in the night and what each one means. Hunger, nightmares, or someone else dying slowly of something that will never have a name. You're a master of things no one should need to master. And somehow that's a kind of pride. The castle teaches you how to survive, how to fold yourself small, how to blend into shadows, how to say just enough to be helpful, but not enough to be remembered, how to clean a wound with cold beer and pretend it's medicine, how to sleep with your feet elevated so the rats nibble your toes last, but it never teaches you how to stop feeling. That part's on you. And lately you've been feeling heavier, not sad, not angry, just full. Like you're made of bricks and every day someone adds another one, another duty, another insult, another early morning or aching joint or moment where someone speaks through you like you're a coat rack. You carry it well. Everyone does. No one talks about it. There are no words for it, but you see it. In the way people walk slower, each week, in the eyes that stop meeting yours, in the sighs that sound like prayers, and the prayers that sound like sighs. You've reached the point where even fantasies feel exhausting, not grand ones. You're long past those, but even small dreams. A bath, a slice of bread with honey that wasn't already nibbled, a smile from someone not actively dying. Those dreams used to keep you going. Now they feel like extra weight. And yet, somehow you're still here. Still waking, still lifting, still ducking your head when the Lord's Son throws something just to see if it hits. Still tucking the girl from the kitchens into her straw pile when she passes out from overwork. Still humming a bit of Hal's old melody when no one's around, just to remember that once someone dared to make a sound for themselves. Still you, a footnote in history, a background breath in the story of someone more important, a moving shape in the corner of a tapestry, but real, tangible, uncrushed. Not yet anyway. And for now, that's enough. Because you have to believe, you need to believe, that somewhere past the gates, past the moat, past the years of silence and soot and servitude, there's a place where people sleep on purpose, where food isn't punishment, where voices are heard, where your name means something, even if no one remembers it. But for now, it's just you and the castle and the weight of one more day survived. Let's talk about the castle itself. The proud, looming stone beast squatting on a hill like it's better than you. Because it is. At least it thinks so. And you're just one more skin-covered inconvenience crawling around its bowels. The first thing you notice about castle life, before the hierarchy, before the hunger, before someone makes you scrub a sword that was never used, is the cold. Castle cold isn't like village cold. It isn't like modern cold. It doesn't flirt with your skin. It doesn't nip at your nose. It moves in, pays no rent, wraps itself around your bones and whispers, "We live here now." The stone walls are 6 feet thick. Impressive, right? Until you realise they're also 6 feet of unrelenting clammy ice sponge that absorb every bit of heat like it owes them money. The floors? Bare stone slabs, smoothed over centuries by miserable feet and urine. They radiate chill up your legs until your knees forget how blood works. Even fires don't help. You'd think they would, but the castle eats fire like it eats everything else. Hungrily, rudely, and without gratitude. You could light 10 hearths in the great hall and still watch your breath curl in front of your face like a ghost auditioning for Hamlet. Windows? Yes, technically. But they're not what you think. No glass, just holes. Slits, really. Arrow slits, draft tunnels, narrow vertical invitations for wind to personally slap you in the face every time it gets bored. They let in light, yes, but mostly wind, and sometimes birds. You've had to chase out an owl before. It wasn't intimidated. It looked at you like you were the guest. Curtains don't exist. Tapestries help a little if you're in a room that has them, which you're not. You have a blanket nailed to a wall. It blocks neither wind nor judgment. The ceilings are absurdly high, which sounds romantic until you realise it's just more vertical space to fill with cold air and bat poop. Speaking of which, yes, bats. They live in the rafters. Sometimes they fall. Occasionally they scream. Always they defecate. You learn quickly not to sleep directly under a beam. That's a rookie mistake. Every step in a castle echoes, which makes sneaking impossible. You could be barefoot, cloaked in silence, trying to tiptoe to the kitchens for a stolen potato, and the floor still betrays you, like an unfaithful bard. Clack, clack, clack. Suddenly, you're a parade. The sound carries through everything. Someone drops a goblet 3 rooms away, and it sounds like the building's collapsing. Someone sneezes in the chapel, and the echo slaps your eardrum in the stables. The castle is an architectural amphitheatre of discomfort. You learn to move slowly, hug walls, and flinch at your own shadow. Let's talk walls. They're not just stone, they're wet stone. Always slightly damp, even when the weather isn't. Touch one and your hand comes away glistening like you high-fived a disappointed sponge. They weep, constantly, especially in the winter. Tiny rivulets run down them, pooling into depressions in the floor that were, at some point, declared acceptable puddles. Mould? Absolutely. Of every kind. Black, green, fuzzy, angry. It grows behind furniture, inside wall cracks, and in one particularly cursed corner of the pantry that no one speaks of anymore. You know mould by name. You've had longer relationships with patches of mildew than most castle marriages. Eat the air inside? Oh, the air. It's heavy. A moist soup of wood smoke, human sweat, boiled turnips, and ambition. Nothing smells fresh. Nothing smells clean. Everything smells like a communal fever dream. You breathe it in every day. You can taste it. The castle air coats your teeth in a way toothpaste, if it existed, would need therapy to address. There is no ventilation system, unless you count hope. Windows don't open, they just exist. Fires are constant, but chimneys are rare and confused about their purpose. Smoke doesn't rise, it hovers, hangs, wanders. You can walk into a room and find a cloud of smoke sitting there like it's waiting to be served dinner. Soot accumulates on everything, on shelves, on food, on people, especially people. After a week, everyone has a faint grey tinge, like you're all slowly becoming stone yourselves. You could write your name in the ash on someone's forehead, and someone probably has. The castle has smells. Specific, vivid, haunting smells. There's the morning stew rot that wafts up from the kitchens, the fermented boot leather from the armoury, the ever-present stagnant moat breeze which floats in through the courtyard and makes you reconsider breathing. Sometimes the smells fight, compete. One moment it's burning tallow and wet fur. The next it's pickled fish and old socks. Occasionally something sweet wafts through. Candied fruit, roast apples, a noble's perfume, and it feels like a hallucination. Like your brain invented it just to stay alive. The furniture is not comfortable. There's no such thing as comfort in a castle. There are benches, stools, chests, all made of wood. All designed by people who thought back pain was a moral failing. You sit carefully, briefly, with the understanding that splinters are coming and they will be medieval. Beds? Rare, reserved. If you're important, you get a bed. If you're not, You get straw, or sacks, or a corner with a coat. You sleep curled up like a mouse that regrets being born, and it's never quiet. The wind howls through cracks. Beams creak, doors groan. Somewhere someone coughs and it sounds terminal. The castle never sleeps. It just lies there, plotting. Roofs leak. Always. Doesn't matter how new they are. Doesn't matter how many wooden shingles were hammered in by some overconfident craftsman with a tunic and a dream. The rain gets in. It finds a way. It drips into your bowl, onto your bedding, down your neck during dinner. You don't question it. You just move the bowl, rotate the bedding, curse the gods and keep chewing. The castle is always dirty. No matter how many servants scrub, it is never clean. Dirt is part of the ecosystem. You sweep it out and it returns, like a determined stray. Mud tracks through every corridor. Soot floats down like seasonal pollen. You wipe a table and watch it grime over again before your hand is off it. Pests thrive here. Not just rats. Although yes, so many rats. Loud ones. Bold ones. Ones that know you by scent and might have nicknames for you. But also lice. Fleas. Mites. Spiders the size of emotional breakdowns. You're constantly itchy. Constantly swatting. Constantly paranoid that something is nesting in your sock. No one deals with it. Not really. There's no pest control. Just vague curses and louder brooms. You can't kill the rats faster than they breed. And some of them might actually be employed. Rumour has it the steward leaves cheese in corners to appease the mouser spirits. You pretend you didn't hear that. Bathrooms? We'll get there. But for now, know this. They're not where you want them. And where you want them, they're not. So the air is always a little suspicious. A little unclear. And in the middle of all this stone and smoke and damp and dirt, you still work. You still move. You still breathe. Because the castle doesn't care if it's falling apart. It's not designed for comfort. It's designed for intimidation, for defense, for projecting power through misery. It's a fortress first, a prison second, and a home somewhere around eighth. You learn to navigate it. Blind corners, hidden steps, draft paths, secret doors you're not supposed to know about, but absolutely use when it rains and you don't want to get slapped by skywater for the 10th time that day. You memorise which floorboards groan, which stairs tilt, which alcoves echo like a cave, and which absorb sound like a grave. The castle doesn't help you survive. You survive despite it. Let's descend into the real heart of castle life. The infrastructure, or more accurately, the chaotic patchwork of medieval guesswork that passes for infrastructure. You'd think a building this large, this important, this full of inbreeding and fragile egos might have been designed with a blueprint. It wasn't. Castles weren't planned. They were stacked, layer by miserable layer, as generations of stone-brained nobles demanded towers, kitchens, chapels, murder holes, and extra bedrooms for their bastard children. Every addition is a compromise, every stairwell an accident, every hallway a dare. Some corridors don't lead anywhere. They just exist. Architectural cul-de-sacs where dreams go to die, and where servants disappear for 20 minutes to cry behind a tapestry. Others lead to forgotten doors, bolted shut with no explanation. The bravest among you once peeked through a crack and saw nothing. Just more stone. And maybe a broom. That was moving. Verticality is the castle's favourite joke. Everything important is up high. Bedrooms, private chapels, strategy rooms, all designed to remind you that you're not important, because you will be climbing stairs for the rest of your life. Steep, uneven, ankle-breaking stairs designed by someone who hated knees and joy. Spiral staircases, mostly. Clockwise, of course, so right-handed swordsmen could stab downhill while left-handers tripped and fell. You take them 2 at a time if you're young, 1 at a time if you're wise, and 0 at a time if you've already fallen and are being dragged back up with a rope and a lot of sarcasm. And the light. Let's talk about light. There isn't any. Castles are dark. Not just dim, dark. Claustrophobic, pitch shifted, shoulder squeezing dark. Daylight filters in through the occasional murder slit or cracked shutter, but it dies halfway across the room like it couldn't handle the mood. Most of your world is firelight, candlelight, lanterns fueled by animal fat. The kind of light that doesn't so much illuminate as haunt. You can't see more than a few feet ahead at night. Shadows stretch into every corner. You've learned to identify people by silhouette, by the way their head tilts or their breath fogs in the cold air. More than once you've spoken to a coat on a hook for 20 seconds before realising it wasn't your supervisor. Which was embarrassing, for the coat. The Great Hall is the brightest room. And even that's generous. It's lit by massive fireplaces and chandeliers that weigh as much as small oxen and are only lit during feasts or when a lord wants to show off to someone he's planning to marry or kill. The rest of the time, you carry your own light. A candle stub, a torch, a glowing stick and a prayer. And if you drop it, you walk in darkness and hope the rat you just stepped on doesn't hold a grudge. Every surface is rough. Nothing is smooth. Not the walls, not the floors, not the benches, not even the spoons. You touch something and it touches back. Sometimes with splinters. Sometimes with goo. You carry cuts on your hands like seasonal accessories. Blood is common. You know the difference between your blood and someone else's. By colour, by texture, by temperature. The kitchens are located in the most inconvenient place possible, always below or behind or across a courtyard full of mud and regret. Why? Because of fire risk. Which makes sense if you don't think too hard about the fact that the castle was already full of fire. So if you're carrying food, you are moving fast over flagstones, downstairs, across breezeways, while balancing a pot full of near-boiling oat sludge, and hoping today isn't the day your ankle becomes a design feature. And the courtyards. Oh, the courtyards. They sound pleasant, like somewhere you'd picnic in spring while listening to a lute solo and waiting for a falcon to land on your shoulder. In reality, they are stone bowls of wind, rain, and the kind of mud that has opinions. You cross them only when necessary, and only with shoes you've already given up on emotionally. There's no drainage system. Water collects, pools, seeps. It creates new kingdoms under the paving stones. Frogs evolve. Mould develops personalities. Occasionally a child drops a bucket into the drain hole and never sees it again. Or the bucket. Possibly both. Walls leak. Not just the outer ones, inner ones, roof joins, archways, places where mortar gave up centuries ago. And the castle decided crumbling is a feature, not a bug. You know the signs. The faint trickle that becomes a steady drip. The moss that appears in places where moss should fear to tread. The sudden sharp chill when wind finds a crack large enough to insert itself into your lungs. And let's not forget the insects. No one ever talks about the insects. Spiders. So many spiders. Some the size of your thumbnail. Some the size of your thumb. They hang from beams, from tapestries, from your hair. You wake up with web in your mouth and hope it's just silk. If it moves, you don't scream. You just nod and let it pass. That's diplomacy. Then there are the flies. Summer brings clouds of them, buzzing through halls, circling food, decorating windows. You swat them away with the same dead energy you apply to everything else. Not because you think you'll win, but because not trying is worse. Fleas, constant companions. You can feel them at night, at midday, on your legs, on your scalp. You've named a few, they never leave. Even the castle cats have fleas. And the cats are the ones running this place. Because yes, there are cats, dozens. Technically they're mousers, but really they're gods. They go where they want, sleep where they want, eat what they want, scratch who they want. And the lord of the manor once stopped a banquet to personally rescue a tabby from a ceiling beam. You, on the other hand, once fell into the kitchen fire and got told to walk it off. Temperature is a lie. There is no room temperature. Only whatever the air decides. Some corridors are frigid, others are steamy. Some feel like they're inside a wine barrel filled with swamp gas. Some are so dry your skin flakes off like antique parchment. There is no pattern, no consistency, only discomfort roulette. In the winter, every breath is visible. Your fingers go numb before you reach the pantry. You warm them by the oven, until the cook slaps you for slacking. In summer, you sweat through your tunic, your undershirt, your dignity. The air smells like salt and onions. You wake up stuck to your own skin, and someone else's. No one has enough clothes. You wear what you have, what someone died in, or what was found in a box labelled for the disposable ones. You layer tunics like grief. You stuff hay into your shoes. You tie sleeves with string. You patch holes with more holes. It's not fashion, it's survival cosplay. And still the castle stands. Somehow, despite the rot, the cracks, the infestations, the unspoken curses carved into door frames by people who knew exactly what they were escaping when they ran screaming into the woods. Because that's the thing about castles. They look impressive from far away, majestic, immovable, like monuments to power. But up close, they're falling apart, just like the people inside them. Let's go somewhere people never fantasize about when they daydream of castles. The walls themselves. They're not just cold, they're alive. Not in the magical storybook sense. No, they're alive with moisture, with mould, with the constant quiet groaning of old stone barely holding itself together. The mortar is crumbling in places, packed with straw and crushed bones. Or, according to legend, the ashes of the last servant who asked for a day off. If you press your ear to a wall, and you've done this, out of boredom or desperation, or because someone locked you in a pantry again, you can hear it creak. Not like a ship, not like a forest, like something tired of standing, something ready to fall but too proud to ask for help. In summer, the heat gets trapped in the walls. The stones sweat, literally. Beads of condensation form in the cracks and run down in slow, sticky trails. If you touch them, they feel wrong. Like the castle is leaking from the inside. Like the stone is trying to tell you, I was never meant for this. And then there are the tunnels. Every castle has them. Secret ones, narrow ones no one will admit to designing, ones even the Lord pretends not to know exist. Some are escape routes. Others are servant passages. Some are just there, dug into the bedrock for reasons lost to time and built by people who left behind no plans. Only scratch marks, a broken spoon, and the faint sound of whispering when the wind hits the stones just right. You've been through some of them, usually under orders, sometimes for punishment. Once to retrieve a noble's prized hunting ferret that ran off mid-feast and somehow wedged itself behind a wall near the larder. They're pitch black, narrow, airless. You crawl with a torch clenched between your teeth and a growing awareness that if you get stuck, no one's coming. You're not important enough to rescue. They'll just wall it up and tell the next servant, we don't use that tunnel anymore. But they're not empty. Sometimes you find bones. Not many, just a femur, a skull, something vaguely foot-shaped and disturbingly recent. No one speaks of them. You just nod, tuck it into a corner out of the way and finish your task. That's the rule in the castle. Unless it screams, it doesn't exist. Above you, the towers reach into the sky like jagged fingers, grasping for clouds they'll never catch. From the ground, they look noble, proud. From inside, they're the worst place to be during a storm. Wind slams through the arrow slits with the force of a drunk god. You can hear it howl. Not metaphorically. It howls like it's hungry, like it wants in. You stack rugs against the cracks and pretend that helps. Roofs are an illusion. They exist, but in a theoretical sense. The tiles are loose, the wood creaks, rain finds a way, always. Sometimes it's a drip, sometimes it's a flood. There's a room near the east tower that floods so regularly it now doubles as a backup fish pond. No one seems to mind. The steward just says, catch what you can. Lightning is terrifying. There's no insulation, no grounding. The towers act like giant lightning rods, and the air smells burnt after every storm. You once watched a weather vane melt. It was the most excitement the guards had all week, and when the storm passes, the leaks increase. The castle shifts, stone swells, doors swell, hinges groan. You can't open half the windows, and the ones you can open scream like they're auditioning for a haunting. Every hinge is a horror. Every latch a gamble. You use cloth to touch metal in winter. Not because you're fancy, but because frozen fingers are how you lose both skin and the will to live. Let's go lower. The basement, the storage level, the undercroft. Every castle has one. And it is never, ever as innocent as it sounds. It's cold. Always cold. Doesn't matter what season. The air is heavier down there. Thicker. Older. You feel it in your throat. The chill that settles in and doesn't leave for hours. If ever. This is where food is kept. Barrels of grain. Sacks of flour. Wheels of cheese. Bins of salted fish. Everything smells faintly of decay and something else. Something fermented and wrong. You know how to walk down here. Softly. Slowly. There are rats, yes. But worse than rats are the eyes. Sometimes you swear you're being watched. Not by people, not even by ghosts. By the castle itself. Like it's waiting. Listening. Remembering. You've seen things move. Not people. Objects. Once a bucket rolled uphill, you don't talk about it. No one does. Because if it's not acknowledged it didn't happen, that's castle logic. And then there's the noise. Castles are full of it, even when they're silent. Creaks, thuds, echoes, a drop of water falling somewhere far away, a door shutting in a corridor no one's using. The clatter of armour with no footsteps. You tell yourself it's the wind, the pipes, the rats. Anything but what it might actually be. The weight of time, shifting slightly in its sleep. Some nights, it's the walls that wake you. Not because they fall, because they breathe. Or at least it feels that way. You lie on your straw mat, staring at the ceiling beam, and swear you feel the stone inhale. There are no locks, Not really. Not on the doors that matter. Privacy is a concept reserved for nobles and priests. Everyone else lives in a state of constant partial exposure. You're always half seen, half heard, half forgotten, and the walls remember more than you'd like them to. There's a smell, old blood, old wine, old guilt, that seeps into the mortar. You can't scrub it out. You've tried. It's not in the walls. It is the walls. Every castle has a well. You don't go near it. Not because of superstition. Because of history. People have fallen into wells. People have thrown things in. Letters, coins, confessions. A severed hand once, according to the cook. You don't look down. You don't want to see what's staring back. You start to forget what outside feels like. The castle becomes your entire geography. You know every corner, every torch bracket, every creaky stair and warm patch of stone where the sun, miraculously, hits for 6 minutes at dawn. You measure your life by those 6 minutes, because outside there's air. Inside there's everything else. Let's talk about sleeping arrangements, or what passes for them in a medieval castle. Because you don't sleep. You survive the night horizontally. Your bedding, if you're lucky, is a worn sack of straw that crunches when you move and smells like something that once nested there still might. If you're not lucky, it's just the floor. The stone. Cold, unyielding, with just enough slope to ensure you wake up in a corner you didn't fall asleep in. You don't even have a blanket. You have something that used to be a horse blanket until the horse got promoted. People snore. Loudly. Obnoxiously. And not in separate rooms. In the same room. In the same space. Sometimes just inches away. Entire choirs of nasal agony harmonizing in a key designed by Satan's dentist. There's no earplugs, no walls, no escape. Someone's always coughing. Someone's always muttering in their sleep. Someone's always scratching something that really shouldn't be making that noise. If the fire's still lit, it's too hot. If it's gone out, you can see your breath. Either way, you're sweating. Or shivering. Or both. And then there's the chamber pot. It lives in the corner. It has no lid. It gets used by multiple people, usually in the dark, usually while everyone pretends to still be asleep. In the morning someone dumps it. Maybe. Sometimes it waits until mid-afternoon. Sometimes it overflows. You've stepped in it. Everyone has. No one talks about it. The walls don't block noise, or smells, or regrets. If someone upstairs drops a fork, you hear it. If someone gets murdered downstairs, you smell it. If someone gets married in the hall, you weep quietly and roll over. Now the noise from the animals. Because yes, they live here too. Horses in the stables, chickens in the kitchen, pigs in the courtyard, dogs absolutely everywhere, including sometimes your blanket, which they claim without negotiation. They bark, grunt, scream, and occasionally burst into your living space during the night like furry burglars on a mission. You've been woken up by goats, not because they're evil, but because they walk like they have something to prove. You once found one standing on a table, staring into the void. You didn't question it. That goat had seen things. The air never feels clean. It's either smoky or musty or wet. Even in your sleep, you're aware of breathing things you probably shouldn't. It's the kind of air that coats your lungs in historical authenticity. You've coughed out flakes of something and chosen not to investigate. The torches along the corridor don't stay lit. They sputter. They pop. Sometimes they scream like they're burning ghosts instead of oil. The shadows move in ways you can't blame on the flame. You try not to look too long at the walls in the dark. They shift. Or maybe your brain does. And then there's the castle sounds. The ones no one talks about. The footsteps when no one should be walking. The slam of a door you know was barred. The clink of metal in the hallway at 3 a.m. when the guards are asleep and the swords are hung. Sometimes it's just wind. Sometimes it's mice. Sometimes it's nothing. But it feels like something. And the whispers. Maybe it's wind in the cracks. Maybe it's rats arguing about territory. Maybe it's the castle itself, complaining that you tracked in too much mud again. But you hear them? Late at night. When the snoring stops. When the coughs fade. When it's just you and the dark, and the breath of the walls. Some people leave food out for the stones. Not for rats, not for people. For the walls. A superstition maybe. A tradition. A plea. You did it once, half jokingly, leaving a crust of bread behind the hearth. The next day, you found 2 extra logs in the firewood pile. Coincidence? Probably. But you haven't stopped doing it since. Then there's the dust. It doesn't fall. It lives. In the beams. In the tapestries. In your lungs. You clean and clean and clean, and it's never gone. It gathers in corners like it's watching. You've seen it swirl in the air and land only where it wants. You sneeze black. There's a staircase near the West Barracks that no one uses anymore. It goes down, deep. The bottom's bricked off now, sealed after someone heard something. You don't ask, you don't descend. But sometimes, when you walk by, the stone feels warm. And that's somehow worse than cold. Let's not forget about the bugs. You expect fleas, you accept lice. But the beetles? The ones that come out of the cracks at night, march in single file across your blanket, and vanish into the fireplace. They're organised, coordinated, possibly militarised. You once saw one carrying something, a crumb maybe, or a secret. There are bees in the eaves, bats in the rafters, wasps in the pantry, spiders behind every curtain. You make peace with it, not because you're brave, but because screaming gets you reassigned to laundry duty, and wet wool is worse than bugs. And yes, there's a crypt. Every castle has one. Sometimes it's beneath the chapel, sometimes under the tower, sometimes it's lost, which just means no one wants to talk about it anymore. You've never been down there, but you've passed the door. Heavy oak, iron bands, carvings you don't recognise, cold that breathes out from the crack like an exhale. One boy opened it once, years ago, thought it would be funny. He doesn't laugh anymore. He doesn't talk, either. Just scrubs pots and stares out windows. His hair turned grey at 14. The castle isn't evil. It's just old and tired and very, very set in its ways. You learn to respect it, to fear it, to coexist. Like a tenant with a very moody landlord who occasionally rearranges the furniture in the night. You stop thinking of it as a building. You start thinking of it as a creature, a beast. Something that allows you to live inside it because it hasn't yet decided to crush you. A cathedral of damp, regret and baked turnip. And then one day, something changes. You find a dry patch of stone, small, warm, soft light coming through a crack you've never seen before. A breeze, clean, clear, scented faintly of pine. You sit, you breathe, and for a moment, a single, stolen, quiet moment, the castle feels almost bearable, like it's not punishing you, like it's offering a truce. Then someone yells for firewood, the moment's gone, the castle is back. And so are you. You don't have a job. You have a sentence. Labour in the castle isn't work the way we think of it today. It's not scheduled. It's not paid. It doesn't start and end. It's just there, woven into every breath you take. You're not employed. You're owned by obligation. You wake up in the dark. Not because there's an alarm, but because you've trained your body to rise at the sound of footsteps and the smell of other people's breath. You don't need to be told what to do. You already know. You've known for so long, you hear orders in your sleep. First task, the fires, the hearths in the great hall, the kitchens, the Lord's chamber. All must be stoked before the sun even considers showing up. You move quickly through the corridors, arms full of damp logs that leave your tunic streaked with ash and your neck dotted with splinters. You dump wood into grates, blow into embers, curse the wind. Pray the smoke goes up instead of sideways. Your fingers are already blackened, your knees are wet, your back hurts. It's not even dawn. Then comes the hauling. Buckets, always buckets, water from the well, water for washing, for drinking, for boiling, for who knows what. Every bucket is wooden, misshapen, and heavier than guilt. They slosh, they splash, they leak just enough to soak your legs, so you get to spend the next 6 hours marinating in your own misery. Sometimes you carry food, not meals, ingredients, sacks of grain, crates of beets, slabs of meat wrapped in cloth that's already soaked through with the blood of something that probably didn't die peacefully. You don't know what it is. You don't ask. You just hoist it over your shoulder and try not to fall down the stairs again. You clean floors with rags on your hands and knees, scrubbing stone that's been walked on by 100 boots since your last pass-through. The dirt never leaves. It just rearranges. The smell never improves. It just rotates. One day it's sweat and stew. The next, dog and dust. Occasionally, wine and blood. You get used to all of it. You stop noticing. That's the trick. Laundry is a punishment, not a job. Washing linen in water that bites your skin, pounding it with stones, dragging it through lye, hanging it in the wind, chasing it when the wind decides you've had too good a day. And when it's dry, you fold it, stack it, deliver it, only to watch some overfed noble smear it with gravy 2 minutes later, like it was designed to suffer. If you're in the kitchens, you chop, and chop, and chop. Turnips, onions, the occasional carrot that looks suspiciously like a shriveled finger. You slice until your hands blister, until your nails turn purple, until you forget what feeding feels like. The cook yells constantly. Not words, just guttural, boiling rage. She's been here 30 years. She communicates entirely in swats, snarls, and sudden saucepans. You stir pots. Gigantic cauldrons of pottage that bubble like they're trying to escape. You've been burned. Everyone has. It's a rite of passage. The back of your hand has a permanent red patch from the day someone bumped your elbow and half a turnip stew tried to graft itself to your skin. You never eat first. You eat after. After the lords, the knights, the guards, the dogs, you get what's left. The lukewarm, scraped up aftermath. Sometimes it's edible. Sometimes it's not. You eat it anyway. Because hunger isn't a mood. It's a constant. Like the cold. Like the ache in your feet. Your feet, God. They are the saddest part of you. Cracked, raw, calloused. Wet more often than dry. Blistered in places you didn't know could blister. You've stepped in everything. Mud, blood, dung, slop, something green and humming. You wear shoes made of leather so thin, it might as well be parchment. If you're not wearing shoes, you're barefoot, which is worse, but only slightly. You're always moving. Always. You sit for 5 minutes and someone finds you. Standing, frowning, holding a ladle or a list. There's no break. There's just, where were you? And why is this not done? And did I say you could stop? Sometimes the tasks don't even make sense. You'll be told to move a crate from the cellar to the top of the tower, then back again, then back up. No explanation, no purpose, just motion, just heat, just breathless climbing until your legs go numb and your arms threaten mutiny. You fetch everything, always. Someone's boots, someone's sword, someone's cousin's favourite spoon. You don't ask questions. You just nod and jog off to the storeroom, praying the rats haven't eaten it, or worse, moved it to start their own kitchen. If you're a woman, you do all of this, and more. You spin thread, weave, sew, mend, watch the children of people who barely know your name, clean messes no one admits to making, bake bread, kill lice, scrub chamber pots. Smile politely when someone says, "You're lucky to be indoors." If you're a child, you work too. You carry, you sweep. You run errands up and down stairs until your knees scream. You get yelled at when you spill something. Yelled at when you look tired. Yelled at when you breathe wrong. Childhood isn't innocence. It's free labour with shorter legs. Injury is expected. A smashed finger. A cut foot. A burn on your arm. No one cares. No one helps. If you can walk, you work. If you can crawl, you work slower. If you can't move at all, someone drags you to a corner and leaves you with a crust of bread and a good luck. You don't cry. Not anymore. Not because you're brave, because you're exhausted. Crying takes energy. It takes water. You're too busy carrying things to carry emotions. But sometimes, late at night, when the corridors are dark and everyone else is finally snoring, you let your back hit the stone wall and your breath escape in a single, broken exhale. Not a sob. Just release. Just the air that's been trapped in your chest since sunrise. And in that moment, for just a second, you remember that you are a person. A human being with bones and blood and limits. Then the rats scurry by. You hear the cook swearing from 3 rooms away. A guard drops something with a crash that wakes the hallway. And your moment ends. Time to stand up. Time to start again. Because the castle never sleeps. And neither do you. Let's say, just for variety, you're assigned to the stables today. Congratulations. Your entire shift now smells like sweat, straw, fermented oats, and the concentrated flatulence of animals too rich in protein and too poor in manners. The horses are beautiful, majestic, giant, twitchy murder beasts that occasionally try to kick your soul into the ceiling beams. Your job is simple. Shovel everything that comes out of the back of a horse, without question or complaint, while standing in a stall that hasn't been truly dry since last summer. And by dry, we mean less than 50% sludge. The floor is a medieval stew of urine, wet hay, and disappointment. If it's winter, your hands freeze to the metal shovel. If it's summer, you can smell your own sadness rising off your clothes. And if you think the horses are grateful, think again. They look at you like you're an insult to their bloodline. One of them is probably technically a duke. Sometimes you feed them. That's easier. Assuming you can lift a sack of oats the size of your self-worth, climb a ladder to the upper loft and pour it into a trough without losing a finger to the most impatient horse in the kingdom. Other days you clean the tack. That means saddles, bridles and straps. All made of leather, all coated in layers of grime, and all smelling vaguely of panic. You scrub until your wrists lock, oil the bits until they shine, and hang them carefully in the tack room, which is home to 1 lantern, 300 spiders, and the ghost of a stable boy who tried to unionise. Still, you might think, at least I'm not in the kitchens. But then they reassign you to the kitchens. The castle kitchen is not some cosy cottage nook where warm bread cools on a windowsill and herbs hang in rustic bundles. It is war. It is fire and knives and boiling chaos. A room full of shouting, steaming, and the unspoken but ever-present understanding that if you drop something, you will be hit with a spoon large enough to qualify as a weapon of war. There's no such thing as recipes. There are lists, screamed, in no particular order. Boil this, chop that, where's the duck? Who took my lard? The cook runs the place like a warship. No smiles, no praise. Just the occasional grunt of acceptance and the deeply meaningful silence that follows when you don't ruin something. You wash dishes in a barrel of water so greasy it qualifies as a new type of broth. You don't dry them. There are no towels. You just wave them vaguely in the air and hope they cool before the next meal, or that the rats don't claim them first. And, oh, the rats, they run the place. You see one, you nod, it nods back. Mutual respect. You know its route, it knows yours. You've named it, you don't tell anyone. Food prep is endless chopping, slicing, dicing, pounding spices with a rock, grinding herbs you can't name, kneading dough that could double as insulation material. It sticks to everything, including your will to live. You burn yourself regularly, not because you're clumsy, because the kitchen is designed for it. The fire spits, the pots bubble, the handles sear. The air itself bites. Your arms are maps of old burns, new ones, and patches of skin you've just decided not to investigate. Then comes the serving. You don't serve on plates. You serve on trenchers. Slabs of bread so stale they might be considered building material. You ladle soup, stew, meat, if there's meat, and rush to the hall like a terrified squirrel holding someone else's dinner. The nobles don't look at you, unless you spill something. Then they all look, hard, long, with expressions that make you wish you could climb into the soup and disappear. If you're lucky, you avoid dropping anything. If you're not, you spend the rest of the night scrubbing it off the flagstones, while the cook lists the many ways you're a disgrace to the art of boiling. If you're truly unlucky, someone requests wine, which means going down into the cellar. The wine cellar is deep, stone, cold, crawling with shadows and dust and the vague possibility of ancient curses. You carry a lantern. You whisper to yourself. You don't look at the barrels too long. Sometimes they drip something that isn't wine. You return to the hall, jug shaking slightly in your hand, knowing full well that if it's the wrong vintage, you'll get a goblet to the head. And remember, all of this is happening before noon, because afternoons are reserved for castle maintenance. That means hauling firewood, fixing shutters, repairing stair treads, polishing armour, mending flags, filling torches, sweeping halls, shaking rugs, washing linens, cleaning tools, sharpening blades, hauling more buckets, refilling candle wax, stirring the compost, feeding the pigs, shoeing the geese, mopping up after the goose fight. And then, as the sun begins to dip behind the curtain wall, you're sent to clean the privies. There's no tactful way to describe this. It's disgusting. A stone chute, a hole in a wooden plank, a vertical pipe of every bad decision humanity has ever made. You scrape, you scoop, you gag, you whisper prayers. You curse every ancestor that ever passed on a work ethic. You wonder how many generations it took to decide this was the best possible bathroom design. The smell follows you. It soaks into your clothes, into your soul. You've tried holding your breath, but it's worse when you gasp. You wear a scarf over your face. It helps, barely. Then you carry it, the bucket, the ladle, the slop, across the courtyard, past the chapel, past the same nobles who will later sip from goblets and complain that the servants don't smell of roses. And when it's finally done, when the pot is empty, the stones scraped, the stains scrubbed, you return to your corner, drop your tools, and sit for 60 seconds until someone calls your name again. Because it's never done. Because nothing is ever done. Because the castle doesn't rest. So neither do you. You begin to realise the castle doesn't just demand labour. It consumes it. You're not a person. You are a renewable resource. A tool with legs. Something to be wrung out like a dirty cloth and hung to dry over a broken wheelbarrow. Let's say you've been reassigned. Again. Now you're part of the work crew. This isn't a formal position. It's what happens when someone looks around and says, that wall's cracked, or that door doesn't close, or I want a garden where the pigs currently sleep. Fix it. Then they point to you. And it's your problem. Fixing a castle is like arguing with a glacier. Exhausting, slow, and the glacier always wins. You carry rocks. Not metaphorically. Rocks. Giant, angry slabs of sandstone that don't want to be moved and make this very clear with each agonising shift. You balance them on a wheelbarrow that's already missing one wheel, which means you're pushing a barrow, which is just a medieval way of saying, good luck, loser. You haul lime, you mix mortar, you slap it into cracks with a trowel so dull it's probably a metaphor for your personality by now. The stone resists. The wind mocks you. The lord who ordered the repairs never comes to check. But if something collapses later, guess who gets blamed? You climb ladders made of wet wood and hope the rungs remember their structural integrity. You balance on ledges with no railings, no ropes, and no margin for error. You've seen people fall. It happens quickly. The scream echoes longer than they do. And when your hands finally give out, when your knees are pudding and your back pulses like a drum solo, someone yells for water. Not to drink, to haul. Because the laundry basin needs filling again. Because the kitchen spilled something. Because the bathhouse, for the noble guests only of course, is being prepared and they want water hot enough to make your fingers blister just carrying it. So you lift the buckets again, down the hall, up the stairs, past the chapel, past the dogs, past the steward, who will absolutely stop you mid-trip to ask why your face looks so complainy today. Let's pause on the stairs. There are many, hundreds. Some of them spiral, some are narrow, some are too wide, as if the architect briefly forgot what a human leg is. They're all different heights. Some creak, some collapse. Some are made of stone so polished from wear that stepping on them wet is like volunteering to meet the afterlife early. You don't count steps anymore. You count trips. You count how many times you've gone from the courtyard to the tower with a bucket, a bundle, a body. You count by bruises. You count by how many layers of skin you've left behind on the railings. And God's help you if you're sent to clean the stairs. That's a whole different kind of hell. You scrub upwards, you scrub downward, you crawl on your knees while people step over you, muttering, "Missed a spot." And they're right. You always miss a spot. Because the stairwell goes on forever. A punishment without end. Sometimes you get a light duty day. This is a lie. There's no such thing. Light duty just means your body doesn't actively fall apart while you're doing it. For example, tending the fire in the upper hall. Sounds easy. Until you realise you're climbing 4 flights of stairs with logs, twice an hour, in a tunic made of wool and fatigue. You sweat, you pant, you arrive in the hall, and everyone looks at you like you ruined the mood just by existing. Or you get sent to hold torches for the guards at night. You stand still for hours in the cold, in the dark, trying not to fall asleep, trying not to shake. Your fingers go numb. Your knees lock. You start hallucinating around hour 3. If you drop the torch, you get slapped. If you breathe too hard, someone says you're attracting demons. There's also errand duty. This is where you run messages, paper sometimes, usually spoken. Tell the cook the feast is moving forward. Tell the kennel master the Baron wants the blonde dog, not the angry one. Tell the scribe to stop crying. You run. You dodge pigs, dogs, armoured men, and furniture that has not moved since the last century. You take wrong turns. You get blamed. You deliver the message, then get pulled into something else. Since you're here, scrub this table. Since you're here, take this to the tower. Since you're here, cry into this bucket so we can salt the fish. And still, people call you lazy. Not to your face. Behind your back. That one moves too slowly. That one didn't smile. That one took a break after only 12 hours of chamber pot hauling. You could collapse in the hall, and they'd say you tripped. You could cough up blood, and they'd say you're dramatic. You could die right there, slumped over a barrel of half-fermented turnip wine, and someone would step over you and say, "Who's on grain milling now?" Speaking of grain milling, it's exactly what it sounds like. You pour grain into a giant, ancient, growling contraption, usually a hand-cranked stone wheel or a windmill that only works when the wind feels generous. You feed it slowly. You turn the crank. You sweat. You curse. You sneeze out flour for 3 days afterward. You inhale so much dust, your lungs start baking their own bread. The grain never ends, and the result, flour so coarse it could be used as sandpaper, gets scooped, packed, and immediately carted off by someone who has no idea how long it took to make. And yet, this is all normal, expected. You know it will be hard. You expect the bruises. You hope for the injuries to be minor. And over time, something shifts in you. You stop resisting. You stop dreaming of rest. You move, you carry, you scrape, you bleed, and it becomes routine. There is no reward. There is no good job. There is no break. There is only done, until you are not. At some point, the work stops being a list of tasks. It becomes your reality. Your body moves before your thoughts. Your feet turn corners you didn't consciously choose. You scrub, haul, chop, carry, and nod, not because you were asked, but because this is what you do. There is no version of your day that doesn't hurt somewhere. You begin to lose track of days. Time in the castle is circular. There are no clocks, no weekends, no holidays, just bells. The chapel bell rings for prayers. The kitchen bell rings for meals. The guard bell rings for shift change. The rest of the day is counted in bruises and blisters. You get hungry at the same hour because your stomach remembers what your mind has given up on. You eat the same thing so many times, you forget what taste is. Bread, pottage, maybe onions. On a lucky day, fish. On an unlucky day, fish that shouldn't be moving anymore. but is. Sometimes, for variety, the Lord throws a feast. You still don't get to rest. You just work more. Feasts are logistical warfare. The kitchen becomes a battlefront. Plates, goblets, knives, roast meats, cooked fruit, boiled wine, sticky sauces, congealing fats. Nothing is simple. Everything has to be perfect. Not for you, obviously. For someone who will eat 2 bites, complain, and throw the rest at a dog. You haul meat dripping with juice down stone corridors at full speed while sweating into your boots and praying no one notices the goose is slightly burnt. You refill wine cups before they empty, mop up spills before anyone slips, and smile politely when someone pinches your arm and says, "Good lad," or "girl," or whatever you are. When the feast is over, they go to bed. You clean for hours. You scrape food off stone, collect bones, wash cloths, carry buckets of dishwater so foul it might qualify as sentient. You work until the oil lamps are nothing but stubs, and the cook is asleep at the table with her head in a pile of leek husks. Then you go to bed, but you don't sleep. You lie down in the dark, eyes open, back aching, mind numb, not thinking, not dreaming, just existing, waiting for the next bell. Some nights, you dream that you're still working, carrying, hauling, moving, and wake up more tired than when you fell asleep. Sometimes you dream that you ran, escaped, slipped out through a gate and disappeared into the woods. You wake up excited until you realise your hands are still calloused, your knees are still raw, and your shirt still smells like cabbage water and someone else's fear. There are tasks that shouldn't exist, but do. Cleaning the latrines, yes, that's already been covered. But what about after the plague cart rolls through? Someone has to clean those rooms. Someone has to gather the bedsheets, scrub the stains, burn the straw, patch the mattresses. Someone has to remove the rats, calm the panicked animals, replace the water, and bleach the stone. If there's lime to spare, which there usually isn't. Sometimes you carry bodies. No one asks, you just know. A quiet nod, a look, a tilt of the head toward the guest room. No one has entered for 2 days. You walk in, you lift, you carry, you do not flinch, you do not cry, you do not pray, you simply walk. The body joins the others. In the pit, in the pile, in the wagon. You return, wash your hands in cold water, and go back to scrubbing a floor where someone dropped stew. There's no talk of grief. No time for it. Grief is a luxury. You work instead. You work when you're angry. You work when you're afraid. You work when you're sick. You work through toothaches, fevers, boils, burns, infections, injuries. You hide them. You hide everything. Because if you stop working, you are useless. And if you are useless, you are replaceable. In a castle, everyone is replaceable. You watch it happen. A kitchen boy trips, breaks his arm. He's gone by morning. A stable hand gets kicked in the chest by a warhorse. They bury him without a name. A washerwoman collapses, carrying wet linens in the rain. No one asks what happened, just, she gone? Someone else takes their job within the hour. Sometimes it's you. Every new task adds to the pile already rotting on your back. You carry more than buckets. You carry the memory of who did the job before. You carry their absence. You carry the knowledge that you might be next. You see the castle wear people down. Not just physically, mentally. You see them quiet, slow, dull. You watch smiles fade. Shoulders sag. Eyes go hollow. You see boys become men too fast. Girls become ghosts before 20. You see young, strong backs curve like old branches after one too many months lifting stone. You see yourself in the metal reflection of a knight's armour, and you don't recognise the tired figure staring back. And the worst part? You start to accept it. You start to think this is just what life is. What your life is. Work. Hurt. Sleep. Repeat. Not because you like it. Because it's familiar. Because you no longer remember how to want something better. Ambition dies early here. So does hope. But routine? Routine lives forever. You become so efficient at your tasks that your mind leaves your body entirely. You chop vegetables and think about nothing. You carry logs while your brain drifts elsewhere. You scrape grime from floors while imagining what grass might feel like between your toes. And in the quiet, the deep, dark, candlelit quiet, you ask yourself, how long can a person do this? Not live, exist, like this. And the answer? Longer than you'd think. Because the castle has no shortage of bodies, but a shortage of will. That's something it knows how to break. You're not equal. That's not philosophy. That's the system. The very stones of the castle are ranked above you. You're not noble. You're not rich. You do not own land, or titles, or even your time. You're a body. A pair of hands. A moving piece on someone else's board. And the board is rigged. There's a chain in the castle. A strict, sacred chain, not made of metal, but of power. It stretches from the Lord's chair all the way down to the mouldy straw under your bedroll. And your job is to stay in your link forever. At the top is the Lord, the master of the castle. He owns it, commands it. His word is law, not metaphorically, literally. If he decides the hallway should be painted blue with crushed blueberries and the blood of virgins, you nod and ask how many buckets. You rarely see him. When you do, you bow, or kneel, or freeze in place and lower your eyes so hard you strain your neck. Eye contact is dangerous. Smiling is suicidal. Speaking, don't even try. The Lord wears silk, jewels, fur. He eats meat every day. He has his own chair, his own table, his own bath, which you heat by carrying pails of water for 2 hours, only for him to sigh and say it's a touch tepid. Beneath the Lord are his kin, the lady of the house, the sons and daughters, the cousins, the in-laws. Each of them believes they are the second coming of destiny and should be addressed with titles longer than your grocery list. Lady Brion of the Eastern Tower, daughter of Sir Alric, Flame of the Frosted Hills. You once called her ma'am. She slapped you with a glove, not out of anger, out of habit. Then come the knights. Big, loud, armoured men who stomp through the castle like they own the floor. Technically they don't, but they do own you, at least for the length of a sentence. Boy, water! Girl, saddle. You, wipe this. They rarely remember your name, usually because they never learned it. You are servant, child, or that one. Knights don't have to be smart, or kind, or sober. Just deadly. And noble-born. That's key. You can train harder than all of them, swing a sword with the grace of a dancer, and still you'll never be one. Because your father shod horses, or emptied latrines, or was never mentioned in church. Then come the guards, rougher, cruder, usually older sons of noblemen who didn't inherit enough land to be important. Their armour's cheaper, their attitude's sharper. They're allowed to hit you, not with intent to kill, just to remind you of your place. They like to remind you often. Then there's the steward. He runs everything. The Lord may own the castle, but the steward operates it. He decides your chores, your hours, your rations. He is judge, jury, and schedule maker. He carries no weapon, but he has all the power. And he uses it, Not because he hates you, but because someone has to, and he has a quota to meet. His favourite phrase is, "You'll do." Not "good job." Not "well done." Just, "You'll do." Like you're a hammer with a chipped handle. Functional. Forgettable. The priests come next. Men of God. Righteous. Clean. Terrified of sin, unless that sin is gluttony, gossip, or eyeing the milkmaid too long during morning prayer. They don't beat you, but they shame you for breathing too loudly, for sleeping in, for sneezing during Mass. If you're caught skipping prayer, the punishment isn't physical, it's worse. It's a lecture. Long, monotone, Latin-laced and full of judgment. You'd rather scrub floors. Then come the tradesmen, blacksmiths, carpenters, bakers, millers. All technically commoners, but still above you. They have skills. They earn wages. They don't answer to you. You answer to them. If the smith wants a pot of boiling pitch at midnight, guess who's hauling the water? They look down on you. Not because they're cruel, because they can, because they have earned their spot by burning, cutting, and baking their way up the social meat grinder. You haven't. So you stay silent and hope they don't spit in your direction. Now we're getting close. To your level. The servants, the cooks, the stable hands, the maids, the scullions, the torchbearers, you. Even among servants, there's a hierarchy. Cooks outrank kitchen maids. Maids outrank chamber pot boys. Torchbearers, oddly, outrank rat catchers, unless the rat catcher is employed directly by the steward's cousin, in which case, congratulations, you now answer to someone who spends his afternoons chasing rodents in a too small hat. You bicker among yourselves, not out of cruelty, out of necessity, because in a castle there's only so much air to breathe, and the easiest way to survive is to make sure someone else has less. So you mock the new boy, you glare at the lazy girl, you hoard scraps, you rat each other out for a cleaner blanket or an extra spoonful of porridge. You don't like doing it, but you don't not like it either. Because when you live at the bottom, kicking sideways feels like climbing. It doesn't take long to realise. In a medieval castle, even breathing is political. There is a correct way to exist, and it is always just slightly smaller than how you currently exist. If you speak too loudly, you're presumptuous. If you speak too quietly, you're evasive. If you're too fast, you're rushing. Too slow? Lazy. Too cheerful? Disrespectful. Too grim? Ungrateful. Your presence is tolerated. Your absence is noted. Your dignity? Irrelevant. Take meals, for instance. Food is ranked, like people. The nobles eat at the raised table, the high table, elevated physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. They sit in chairs, not benches. Their cups are metal. Their bread is white. Their meats have sauces. The closer to the Lord, the more spices you taste. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. These are status ingredients. The further away you sit, or in your case stand, or squat in a hallway, the blander and browner the food becomes. By the time you're scraping the pot in the scullery, you're eating a greyish-beige sludge that used to be peas. Probably, if someone important drops a morsel, say a bit of duck glazed with honey, a dog might get it. Not you. A dog. And no one questions this, not even you. Because the dog is technically higher on the social ladder. It has a name, a collar, a favourite cushion. You have a number, a tunic, and a rash from washing sheets in river water. You've made eye contact with that dog. It knows. Bathing is another hierarchy. The Lord bathes in the private chamber, alone, with rose water. You heat it. You pour it. You hold up a curtain so he doesn't have to look at you. If you speak, he might fine your entire family a hen. The knights bathe in the armoury, together, loud, splashing, with wine and songs and none of the modesty they lecture you about. The servants? You wash in shifts, 4 at a time, in reused water, in a wooden tub outside the kitchen, behind a ratty curtain that smells like mould and anxiety. If it's winter, the water burns like knives. If it's summer, it turns green between groups. There's no soap, just sand. You scrub with handfuls of it, like you're trying to erase your skin. But at least you get to bathe. The stable hands do not. There's a boy named Cal who hasn't bathed in 6 months. You know this because you've smelled it. His reward? The guard calls him Mule Face and throws turnips at him during patrols. Clothes are ranked too. The nobles wear colours, deep greens, rich blues, crimson, purple if they're especially drunk on status. You wear brown, not because it was chosen, but because it's the natural shade of linen after 1,000 washes and no hope. Your tunic is itchy, coarse. It doesn't fit. The hem is uneven. The sleeves are too short. There's a stain near the waist you stopped trying to explain 2 seasons ago. If it tears, you sew it. If it burns, you patch it. If it disintegrates entirely, the steward sighs and gives you one that's worse. Belts are a luxury. Shoes are a miracle. You once saw a guard with fur-lined boots, actual fur. You stared for too long, and he said, "You want to kiss them, peasant?" You didn't reply, because you weren't sure what the right answer was. So you just coughed and walked away and tried to forget that your own shoes have holes in 3 dimensions. Even the way you walk is monitored. There are corridors you cannot use, rooms you must not enter, doors you pass through sideways, silently, as if your shadow might offend the wallpaper. You carry things to nobles with both hands, palms up, knees slightly bent, eyes down. You practice this. You were taught this. Not in school. In pain. A wrong glance. A wrong step. A wrong breath. You apologise constantly for things you didn't do. "Sorry, sir. My fault, milady. Forgive me, I didn't mean to stand here, or breathe here, or exist here without asking. No one says it's required, but it is. Even apologies have rules. Too sincere? You're mocking. Too quick? You're insincere. Too slow? You're stalling. There is no version where you win. Nowhere is this clearer than in punishment. Nobles sin in private. Servants sin in public. When a noble gambles too much, his father scolds him behind oak doors. When you forget to shut the pantry, you get slapped in front of the kitchen staff and called a rat-spirited idiot by the cook, while a knight laughs and wipes gravy from his chin with your apron. The steward keeps a list. An actual list. Mistakes, lateness, broken items, whispered rumours. He tallies them. No one sees it, but you know it exists. Because every few weeks, someone disappears for a day, then returns walking stiffly, quietly, with new bruises and a deeper silence. There's a broom closet near the grain cellar. You've heard things. Cries, whimpers, prayers. No one talks about it. But everyone glances that way when the steward clears his throat too loudly. Sometimes humiliation isn't loud. It's small. Being passed over for a better meal. Being made to kneel while others stand. Being told your name is too long and being renamed boy. Having your bedroll moved closer to the draft as a joke. Being asked to taste the wine first, just in case someone poisoned it. Laughing is dangerous. If you laugh with nobles, they call you presumptuous. If you laugh at them, even by accident, You'll be on your knees scrubbing the latrines with your own shirt before the hour's up. So you laugh only among your own. In the laundry room, the stables, the pantry at night. Quiet laughs, dry ones, sharp, fast, temporary things. You don't linger in joy. Joy is suspicious. Joy means you're not tired enough. The hierarchy doesn't just exist outside you. Eventually it gets in. You start to believe the ladder. Not all of it. Just enough to survive. You tell yourself the Lord is wise, the steward is fair, the knights are brave, the hierarchy is natural. You bow faster, speak less, expect less. And when someone below you, a newer servant maybe, forgets their place, you correct them. Not out of cruelty, out of habit. Because if they climb too high, they might push you down a rung. And at the bottom of the ladder, even a single rung feels like a throne. Eventually, you slip up. It doesn't matter how careful you've been, how quiet, how small. Mistakes are inevitable. And in a castle, mistakes are theatre. You spill a cup, say the wrong title, enter a hall too early, breathe too loud near someone who had a stressful morning and needs a scapegoat. And suddenly, you're the show. Public correction is a sport in this place. Not because it teaches anything, but because it reminds everyone who's above whom. It starts with a shout, maybe from the steward, maybe the cook, maybe a minor noble with a fondness for dramatic scolding. Loud, echoing, designed to draw eyes. Boy, girl, you, what is this travesty? Heads turn, conversations pause, utensils hover over plates. You freeze. Your body already knows what's coming. It tightens, shrinks. You drop whatever you're holding. Hands up, palms open. You want to vanish. You want to melt into the floor, like grease down a kitchen drain. But the performance has begun. The words come next. Lazy, incompetent, dirty, ungrateful, peasant. They use the word like it's a slur, because here it is. A peasant is not a person. It's a problem. An inconvenience with fingers. The scolding might go on for minutes, or an hour. You will be reminded, in exquisite detail, of your place, your failures, your replaceability, and of the mercy being shown by not punishing you further. Which is of course a lie, because punishment always follows. It might be extra duties. Carrying stones from one end of the castle to the other until your arms numb. It might be humiliation. Cleaning the nobles' boots while they wear them. Standing in the hall all day holding a torch until your knees tremble and you hallucinate music. It might be silence. No one speaks to you. No one helps. You're invisible. A walking cautionary tale. Others glance at you with pity they can't afford to show. Because pity is treason. Then there's corporal punishment. It's not common, but it happens. A slap, a cuff to the ear, a switch across the palms, usually from the steward, sometimes from the lord himself, if he's feeling theatrical. It's fast, sharp, public, purposeful. You're not injured, you're displayed. It's not about pain. It's about precedent. It's about teaching everyone else what happens when boundaries blur. When servants forget that they are, in fact, flesh and bone furniture. You've seen it happen to others. A girl who dropped a bowl, made to kneel with it on her head until sunset. A boy who forgot a name, had his tunic cut and worn inside out for a week. An older man who spoke out of turn, sent to clean the battlements in the rain without boots. The punishments are rarely written down. They're remembered in whispers. You start to learn the rituals of humiliation, the subtle cues. If the lady frowns when she enters the hall, someone will be blamed for the smell. whether there is one or not. If the knight tosses his goblet instead of handing it back, he's waiting to see if a servant dares to sigh before cleaning it. If the steward raises his eyebrows after reading a list, someone's forgotten something, and it won't matter what. The punishment is already chosen. There's even a hierarchy to apologies. A noble apologises with a gift, a knight with a joke, a servant with a bow. You apologise by staying silent and fixing the thing that went wrong before anyone asks you to, even if it wasn't your fault. Especially if it wasn't your fault. You learn to take the blame. Quickly, willingly, because guilt, when owned early, can be shielded. If you confess fast, sometimes they go easier. Sometimes, but not always. Sometimes they decide today is the day you learn a lesson. And the lesson is never what they say it is. You once broke a plate. An old, cracked thing, barely holding it together. You apologised, replaced it. But the knight it belonged to decided the real problem was your lack of gratitude. So you were ordered to polish every piece of tableware in the great hall. Forks, knives, goblets, platters, pewter, brass, silver, with a rag made from your own ruined tunic, in silence, while others dined around you. You stood beside their laughter. Your fingers bled. And when you finished, the knight told you, "See, now you understand service." He smiled like he'd changed the world. You nodded like he had. The humiliation isn't always personal. Sometimes it's cultural. A boy with a strange accent. A girl who prays differently. A servant with hair that curls the wrong way. They become targets, slowly, systematically. Mocked for their words, their posture, their habits. You don't join in, but you don't stop it either. Because the chain has to swing downward, always. And if you break it, if you show compassion, it whips back and hits you. There are jokes you learn to laugh at, even when they slice. A guard tells you the floor's so dirty it must be your reflection. A noble tells you the stew smells like your village. A knight calls you mutt and barks when you pass. You chuckle, because not laughing would be dangerous. Even the jester, the one person in the castle allowed to mock the lord, punches downward. He juggles apples and throws one at the cook's assistant. He mimics your limp, your lisp, your broken tooth. People cheer. He bows. And you go back to mopping, pretending you didn't feel the heat in your face. You've had moments of rebellion. Small ones. You've dropped a ladle on purpose, whispered curses into the grain bin, served cold food to a rude guest, scrubbed one corner of the hall half-heartedly. Tiny, secret rebellions. But they don't fix anything. They don't save you. They just remind you that there's still a person inside this uniform, that behind the smile, the nod, the bowed head, there's someone awake. Until that becomes a danger too. So eventually, even rebellion fades. You learn to find pride in tiny things instead. A clean floor, a full bucket, a pat on the back from the kitchen maid who noticed you folded the linens tighter than needed. These are your wins. Small, quiet, uncelebrated, but yours. Eventually, you stop asking why. Why them and not you? Why he gets wine and you get water? Why she gets to speak and you have to bow? Why you're the one hauling a bucket of fish guts through a corridor while a drunk baron mistakes a harp for a goat? The question rots because the answer never changes. It's because they were born higher. That's it. It has nothing to do with merit, or kindness, or effort, or intelligence, or how many hours you've worked, how many calluses you've grown, How many nights you've stayed up sewing seams by candlelight while frost grew on the inside of the window? No, you are here, because you were born here. And once that fact settles into your bones, things change. You begin to expect less. You don't flinch when someone yells. You flinch when they don't. Because silence is unpredictable. Silence means they're waiting, watching, plotting the next small correction. You stop looking people in the eye, not out of fear, out of calculation. It's easier to avoid the tension, to sidestep the risk, to become a part of the background. Stone, straw, furniture. Your voice fades too. You speak only when spoken to, and even then, only in short, practiced bursts. Yes, sir. Of course, my lady. Right away? Apologies. These aren't words, they're defences. Like armour, except lighter and lakier. When you're asked for your opinion, it's a trap. The correct answer is agreement, always. If the Lord says the weather is fine, you nod. Even if your boots are wet with sleet. If the lady says the pottage tastes lovely, you smile. Even if it tastes like boiled moss and salt. If a knight says something cruel about the way your friend walks, you chuckle. Even if it kills you. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is attention. You do not want attention. Attention is a hand gripping your shoulder in the hall. A name shouted from across the courtyard. A finger pointing at your dirty hem. A voice asking, "And what do you think?" You do not want to think. Thinking means remembering that you are a person. And that memory is not useful here. You watch people forget themselves. Slowly. A boy who once sang songs while sweeping now hums only when alone. A girl who used to dance while hauling water now moves stiffly, mechanically, like a puppet whose strings are being pulled by dread. The older servants are the worst, because they've made peace with it. They've carved out their roles in the hierarchy so deeply, they no longer see the walls. The steward's assistant, once a rebel, now barks orders with the same cold detachment he used to protest. The head laundress, who used to sneak you sweets, now scolds you for smiling too wide near the corridor where nobles pass. Don't be noticed, she says. Don't rise too fast, she warns. Don't think you're more than your tunic. She means well. She's protecting you from hope, because hope is dangerous. Hope makes you lift your chin. Hope makes you question the system. Hope makes you want. And wanting leads to disappointment, which leads to mistakes, which leads to punishment, which leads to less than you had before, so you learn not to want. You stop wanting better food, better sleep, better clothes, better treatment. You learn to want survival. That becomes your compass. You want the day to pass without incident. You want your name to go unspoken. You want the stew to be warm and the cook to be in a good mood. You want to keep your shoes another month. You want the night to come quietly, without a drunken brawl or a spontaneous inspection of the servant quarters. You want peace, even if it's cold, even if it's silent, even if it's laced with submission. Peace in a castle is what happens when the hierarchy is obeyed, and the humiliation runs smooth. You still see the injustices. You're not blind. You see the Lord's daughter spill an entire bowl of wine and giggle. No one yells. You see a guard snatch a plate of bread from the kitchen and say, "Taxes." No one flinches. You see the steward take credit for a feast that nearly broke the backs of 10 servants. Everyone claps. You see a scribe misspell a noble's name in the daily records and blame you. And somehow you apologise. There is no court of appeal. There is no second chance. There is no clearing your name. There is only acceptance. Because justice here is just a longer word for power. And you don't have any. So you kneel, even when you want to scream. You bow, even when your spine aches. You serve, even when your hands shake with fury you dare not name. But there are moments, tiny, defiant moments. Not loud, not bold, but yours. You eat a piece of fruit that was meant for the pigs. You sleep 5 minutes longer than allowed. You tuck a note into a friend's bucket, just to make them smile. You spit in the stew just once, and stare blankly as the steward compliments its complex flavour. You don't feel powerful, but you feel alive. And that, more than rebellion, more than speeches, more than revolution, is your quiet victory. To remain a person, underneath it all. To hold a single thought in your own voice. I am still here. Because in a place built to strip you down, bend you low, and teach you to love the taste of dirt, remembering that you exist is the boldest act of all. Life in a medieval castle isn't just controlled by walls, whips, and work schedules. It's controlled by ideas, and not gentle ones. You're not free to believe what you want, or act how you feel, or even think things that stray too far from the approved script. There's a hierarchy of mind here, a strict, bone-deep obedience to the structures no one dares question. And it begins, always, with God. You don't know God, you don't see God, but you feel him, everywhere, in the bells, in the silence before supper, in the fear that creeps up your spine when you forget to bow your head. The chapel is the most pristine room in the castle. Not the hall, not the ladies' chambers, the chapel. Because if you offend a noble, you might get whipped. If you offend God, you might die. Or worse, be born as a rat in the next life, assuming you're lucky enough to get one. Mass is not optional. You go. You kneel. You mouth Latin words you don't understand. You pretend to follow the reading, even if your stomach is growling so loud you can barely hear the priest. The priest preaches about heaven, and you try to imagine it. But all you can picture is a castle without stairs, without shouting, without work. You confess, even when you haven't sinned, because everyone has something. A stray thought, a curse under your breath, a dream where you were warm. Confession isn't about honesty, it's about proving you're submissive, that you know your place before God, and therefore before everyone else. Then there are the rules, hundreds of them, unwritten, unquestioned. Who eats first? Who walks where? Who gets to sit during meals? Who gets wine? Who gets water? Who speaks first in conversation? Who bows? Who kneels? Even your posture is dictated. You don't slouch. You don't lean. You don't cross your arms unless you're cold, and even then, you do it discreetly. If someone visits the castle, even a minor lord from a nearby fief, the entire place descends into protocol madness. Banners must be raised. Linen must be changed. Soup must be hotter than usual. You must remember how to address him. Lord Everick, son of Roderick, of the Northern Fields. If you call him sir, and he's feeling generous, he'll just ignore you. If he's not, you'll be mucking the kennels for a week, and you will say thank you. Because culture isn't just about order, it's about performance. You perform your obedience. You perform your piety. You perform your joy. Every smile is measured. Every silence has meaning. Every word is weighed. The way you respond to "how are you today" isn't about how you feel. It's about what they expect. I'm well, thanks to your grace. Not I'm tired, not my hand hurts, not I haven't eaten yet. Truth is not currency here. Deference is. Even the holidays, which should be a reprieve, become stages for compliance. There are dozens of feast days, saints you've never heard of, miracles you can't pronounce, but they all require work. You wake early, dress in your clean tunic, which means the one with fewer holes. You help decorate the hall. You gather herbs, you sing, you kneel, you parade. If the feast is for a noble's birthday, it's even worse, because you're expected to enjoy it. Even as you clean the floors. Even as you serve the meat you won't taste. Even as you fill goblet after goblet and try to smile when someone spills it on you by accident. There are ceremonies for everything: birth, death, marriage, blessings of the grain, thanks for a good harvest, penance after a bad one, dedications, oaths. Even the changing of the guard has a chant, because why not? You stand still during these events, still like a statue, still like someone afraid that movement itself might be sacrilege. If your nose itches during Mass, you let it itch. If your foot cramps during a sermon, you let it cramp. You do not draw attention to yourself, because drawing attention is disrupting the order. And that is the one sin worse than laziness. You can be slow, you can be clumsy, you can even be smelly. But if you disrupt the order, you are dangerous, and dangerous things must be removed. Superstition laces every breath. You knock on wood before entering a noble's room. You sprinkle salt in corners if someone gets sick. You avoid the well at dusk, because that's when the old spirits rise, whatever that means. You leave offerings to saints. Scraps of bread, old buttons, a piece of lace, not because they do anything, but because not doing it feels like inviting doom. You wear a sprig of thyme around your wrist, because the washerwoman said it keeps away bad dreams. It doesn't, but you still wear it, because belief here isn't rational. It's learned. It's whispered into you. By mothers, by priests, by cooks who tell you not to stand too close to the hearth on All Souls' Eve, or the dead will steal your voice. You don't question. Because questioning implies arrogance. It implies you think you know better than tradition, than the steward, than the priest, than God. And in this world, that is unforgivable. You've seen what happens to those who question. A mason who refused to pray before a build, struck in the leg by a falling stone. The priest said it was judgment. A girl who laughed at the relics, sent to a convent for reflection. She didn't return. An old woman who claimed she saw omens in the clouds vanished. Some say she fled. Others say she was taken. No one asks, and no one mentions it, because silence is safety, and belief, real or faked, is survival. You memorize the rituals like multiplication tables. You cross yourself before the stairs, because a stable boy once tripped there and broke his arm. You whisper a prayer when turning a corner, because that's where the steward caught a boy eavesdropping. You touch the chapel door 3 times before entering. You stop laughing at certain jokes. You stop thinking certain things, because culture in a castle isn't just what people do, it's what people don't dare to stop doing. Belief in the castle is not just about religion, it's about control. And the deeper you fall into its grip, the more you start to understand this isn't about faith. It's about obedience disguised as tradition. No one says, you must kneel to the steward. But you do, because it's always been done. Because not doing it makes people stare. And the stare is worse than the rule. You kneel, you bow, you speak with words that aren't yours. You cross yourself before entering the bakery because the last boy who didn't. The oven burned the bread. A coincidence? Probably, but no one forgets. Superstition is the second language of the castle. You don't question where it came from. You just inherit it. A pinch of ash on your forehead at Lent. A drop of wax in your wine during harvest. A rooster feather tucked in your boot for long walks. To confuse the demons, according to the kitchen maid, who has 13 kids and hasn't smiled since the last one was born. The nobility pretend they don't believe in superstition, but you've seen them knock on the hilt of a sword before drawing it. You've seen them salt a doorway before leaving for war. You've seen them whisper to their dogs at night. Belief isn't rational here, it's ritual, and ritual is sacred, even if no one remembers why. The steward makes you light candles in a particular order. The lady of the house refuses to eat the first out of a new barrel. The guards won't use the west gate on Thursdays. There's no explanation. There's no origin. It's just what's done. And if you ask why, if you ask at all, you get a look. That long, hollow stare. The one that says, don't. Don't unmake what keeps us sane. Because in a world this unpredictable, belief is the only blueprint. Even if it's drawn in chalk and fear. You see it in weddings. The ceremony is more performance than celebration. The noble bride wears a veil so heavy she nearly faints. The groom recites vows written by a priest with ink so old it crumbles. You stand at the edge, watching, clapping when cued, smiling as if love is real and choice is part of it. The truth? Weddings are transactions. Land for loyalty, bloodlines for property, women as treaties. And when the dancing starts, if it starts, you're already scrubbing the hall clean of wax drips and red wine stains that will never fully come out. The only real belief during weddings, that no one should marry for love. That's a peasant's dream. A bard's lie. You learn to erase it before it takes root. You also learn the culture of silence. You do not speak when nobles argue, even if they're wrong, even if it affects you, even if they're yelling about the wrong servant, or punishing the wrong maid, or ordering 10 pigs when you only have 4. You say nothing, because speaking is risk, and silence is safety. The belief runs deep. If you endure enough, you'll be spared. You won't, but belief doesn't care. Belief is a shield, even when it's made of paper. In the Great Hall, there are paintings of saints, eyes that seem to follow you, hands that never point, feet that never move, and still you avoid looking too long. Because someone once said they blink, you don't test it. Culture is not made of logic, it's made of consistency. You eat the same meal on St. Andrew's Day every year. You burn the same herb bundle every equinox. You tell the same story about the cursed soldier who lost his name after laughing during Mass. You've heard that story 20 times. It's probably not real. You still tell it. Because repetition is a kind of faith. And faith in a castle is stronger than mortar. You see belief in the architecture too. The castle itself is a kind of god. You treat it with reverence. You don't slam doors. You don't whistle in the corridors. You don't step on the centre stone of the main hall. It's cursed, someone says, because that's where a noble's son died in a duel over inheritance no one remembers. The stone is cracked, but so is everything else. Belief fills in the gaps. The chapel has gold leaf, hand-painted walls, candles imported from the coast. But you aren't allowed to touch anything. You kneel on cold stone. You cross yourself with 2 fingers, not 3, unless the priest says otherwise. And when the bells ring, you stop what you're doing, even if you're elbow deep in laundry, and you pray, not because it helps, but because not praying is worse. And somewhere in this elaborate ecosystem of worship and warning, you begin to believe too. Not all of it, not loudly, but just enough to stay quiet when someone sneezes twice, because that's a sign of bad luck. Just enough to wince when a broom falls, because that means death is near. Just enough to wear your grandfather's tooth on a string around your neck, even though you tell people it's just a charm. And no one questions it, because everyone is pretending. Pretending that culture is eternal, that rules are divine, that ceremony means something, that power is earned, that God sees everything, but especially when you forget to bless the bread. Pretending is safer than doubt. And if you do it long enough, it stops being pretend. It becomes survival. There comes a point when you no longer follow the rules. You embody them. The bow isn't something you remember. It's something your spine does before your brain catches up. The prayer isn't something you recite. It's something your lips whisper when your hands move a certain way. Even if your heart is thinking about stew, it stops feeling like imitation. It becomes instinct. Not because it makes sense, but because it keeps you safe. The culture of the castle, its rituals, its hierarchy, its sacred silences, begins to seep into your thoughts. You find yourself judging others by how well they follow it. She didn't cross herself before entering. He spoke during the bell. They forgot to bless the dough. You don't say these things aloud, but you notice. Because when someone breaks a rule, they ripple the surface of the water you've been treading your whole life. And for a moment, you feel the cold. Then you do something horrible. You look down on them. Just a little. Because in this system, looking down is the only way to avoid falling lower. Even if you hate it. You cling to culture like a raft in the sea. Because if you let go, you'll drown. Not just in punishment, but in the terror of realizing none of this is natural. So you embrace the unnatural. You start to correct your posture when no one's looking. You rehearse greetings under your breath. You fold your hands when idle. Not because anyone told you to, but because not folding them makes you feel exposed. Culture is internal now, not a cage around you, a cage within you. And the worst part? You're not alone. Everyone is in their own cell. The older servants become gatekeepers of tradition. They police behaviour like priests, not because they're cruel, but because they were broken first. They tell you how things used to be, back when the old lord was alive, back when the bannermen still visited from the north, back when the steward had 2 eyes and a temper, back when people respected the fast days, and no one dared eat pork on the eve of St. Gilric unless they wanted to lose a toe to demons. They say these things with reverence, as if pain and fear were signs of a better time. And you nod. Because arguing doesn't change the past. It only gets you a slap on the wrist and a warning about how young people these days have no discipline. You start to see how deep this goes. It's in the language. Nobles don't speak like you. Their Latin is smoother. Their insults are wrapped in velvet. Their orders sound like compliments until you realise you've just been asked to clean a chamber pot as a token of your loyalty. You try to mimic them, not because you want to rise, but because you want to survive. Speech is hierarchy. Accent is identity. Fluency is status. You know this. So you learn, not from books. You don't have those. You learn from watching, listening, copying. You say, "My lord," before yes. You say, "Forgive me," before "I didn't know." You say, "May it please you," before any request. Even when you're asking for more soap. Even when you're asking not to be whipped. Especially then. The church doesn't help. The priest doesn't preach love. He preaches order, obedience, humility, suffering. He says suffering brings you closer to God, and you look at your cracked hands and wonder if God is already living inside your knuckles. He says wealth is a test that the rich must be humble, but they aren't, and no one calls them out, because they fund the chapel, they commission the art, they import the wine, they donate land and gold and favours, and in return they are absolved. While you get a dry wafer and a splash of wine so bitter it tastes like old nails. Still you kneel, because kneeling means you belong. And belonging, even painfully, is better than standing alone. There are moments where doubt creeps in, tiny cracks in the mortar. When you see a noble laugh at the priest behind his back. When you see a steward pocket food meant for the poor. When you hear a bishop say the poor deserve their station. And something twists in you. A tiny flame. A spark of rebellion. But rebellion in a castle isn't loud. It's silent disbelief. It's pretending to pray while wondering what the prayer actually means. It's bowing slower than usual just to feel the drag. It's smiling while imagining what it would be like to not smile. Just once. But these thoughts are dangerous, so you bury them. You wrap them in scripture. You hide them behind ritual. You memorize the saints. Not because you believe they'll help you, but because forgetting them is worse. You touch the relics. Not because they're holy, but because not touching them might mean getting blamed if something goes wrong later. If a chimney collapses, it's because someone forgot to burn rosemary. If a child gets sick, it's because the fire wasn't blessed on Candlemas. If the Lord's wine soured, it's because someone whistled inside the chapel. Belief is a network of blame, and blame in a castle is gravity. It always falls downward, onto you, so you build your life around avoiding it. You become fluent in rituals not because they uplift you, but because they protect you. Culture becomes your armour, even if it's made of myth and fear. And over time, you forget what it's like to be spontaneous, to speak plainly, to laugh freely, to question. Because in a place where everything is sacred, nothing is safe. And when belief becomes survival, truth is just a liability. Eventually you forget who you were, not all at once. It happens slowly, like watching your reflection fade from a puddle as someone stirs the water. The face is there, then not. The voice too. Once loud, now muffled. You are still you, technically. But you are not your own. You belong to the rituals. You wake by the bell. You eat by the bell. You pray by the bell. The bell tells you when to wash, when to scrub, when to serve, when to kneel. It chimes more than 100 times a day. And each time, you obey without question. Not because you're afraid, because you no longer need to think. The culture has replaced cognition. What once required awareness is now reaction. You don't make choices. You follow paths. If you were given freedom tomorrow, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You wouldn't know how to choose clothes without checking the feast day. You wouldn't know how to sleep without calculating how many hours until sunrise prayer. You wouldn't know how to speak without apologizing first. This is not discipline. It is erasure. And it's working. The priest tells you this is how it should be, that the meek shall inherit the earth, though probably not in your lifetime. That pride leads to hellfire. That obedience is the path to salvation, and you believe him, because what else is there? If obedience isn't holy, then your life is meaningless. If suffering isn't sacred, then your pain is just pain. That can't be right. There must be purpose in this. You repeat the catechisms not to worship, but to keep from screaming. The litany is your lullaby. I am humble, I am low. I am grateful for my station. I serve as I was born to serve. The others say it too, together, a chorus of resignation. It becomes a shared language, not of hope, but of endurance. You see a new servant arrive, bright-eyed, curious. He asks too many questions. He forgets to bow. He lingers at the chapel doorway instead of entering. Not out of defiance, just confusion. But confusion is dangerous. You warn him, quietly. You tell him to stop thinking so hard, to move with the others, to copy if he can't remember, to never, ever ask why. You don't do this out of malice. You do it because you care, because you've seen what happens to people who think too much in a place that punishes thought. They vanish. Not physically, at least not always, but emotionally. The laughing girl who used to sneak raisins has gone mute. The boy who once read poetry aloud now spends every meal staring at the same wall. The cook's assistant who painted little animals on the bread crusts was sent away for disturbing the natural order. You don't disturb the order. You become part of it. Even celebration is scripted. When a harvest goes well, there's music. But not your music. Not the kind with stomping feet and off-key choruses and laughter that rattles the roof. It's formal music, played by trained hands for noble ears. You listen from the shadows, clapping when told, smiling when safe. You're permitted to be near joy. Not in it, not of it, just beside it, like a ghost. If someone dies, and they do often, you're expected to mourn properly. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to show reverence, but not enough to seem dramatic. You cry in silence. You carry the body with steady arms. You bow to the grave, then return to work. Because grief, like everything else here, is a performance. And the performance never ends. You've stopped wondering what's real, whether God sees you, whether the saints listen, whether the Lord's authority truly came from heaven or from a sword passed down by people who decided that their bloodline was holier than yours. It doesn't matter. Because even if it's all fiction, it's the only story you're allowed to tell. You once whispered a different story, a dream, a version of life with choices, where bread was shared, where prayer was personal, where nobles weren't gods and servants weren't shadows. You told it to a girl in the garden. She listened. She smiled. And the next morning, she was reassigned to the outer fields. You haven't seen her since. You don't tell stories anymore. The silence is safer. Even your dreams begin to change. You no longer dream of warmth or escape. You dream of clean floors, of a nod from the steward, of a moment without shouting. Your mind, once a spark, now flickers like a candle in a sealed room, enough to see by, never enough to burn. You've become good at surviving. So good, in fact, that you begin to think this is what thriving must feel like. Obedience becomes comfort. Control becomes clarity. Humiliation becomes normal. And belief? Belief becomes you. Not because it's true, but because it's all you have left. There's a corner of castle life no one talks about. Not during Mass, not during meals, not even in whispers when the candles burn low and the wine loosens tongues. It's not because they don't know. It's because they know too well. This corner is cold. It's wet. And it stinks of blood, vinegar, and secrets. It's the dungeon. You don't go there. Not unless you've done something wrong. Or someone says you've done something wrong. Or someone simply needs to remind others that wrongness has consequences. There's no trial. There's no jury. There's just the steward's nod, the guard's grip, the sound of your feet dragging across uneven stone. And then the cold. The kind that gets inside you. The kind that outlasts seasons. The kind that whispers, "No one knows you're here." You've seen the devices. Not all of them, but enough. Iron cuffs bolted to the walls. A chair with spikes. Actual spikes. A cage barely big enough to kneel in, suspended above a barrel of water. There's a table. Wooden. Blood-stained. Cleaned often, never clean enough. You don't know what happens on it. You don't ask. But you know what you hear. At night, the cries, the begging, the silences that follow. Everyone knows the dungeon isn't just for criminals. It's for examples. You once heard a man was taken there for calling the Lord's niece plain. You heard he walked differently when he came back, and that he never looked anyone in the eye again. Then there are the punishments that don't even require a dungeon. The stocks, a crowd favourite. You kneel, or sit, or stand, depending on which part of you they want to ache the longest, while your head and hands are clamped into position. Then the fun begins. Rotten fruit, muck, laughter, rocks if no one's looking. Children are encouraged to participate. It's instructional. You saw a boy cry once, his skin purple with bruises, his lips split, and his tunic soaked in ale. The guard said, "Good sport today," then walked away. Sometimes it's not even punishment. Sometimes it's just tradition. The Festival of Fools, for example, where the roles reverse, in theory. Servants wear masks. Nobles pretend to serve. The jester becomes king for a day. It sounds fun. It isn't. Because the laughter is mean. The roles are costumes, not compromises. The king for a day is expected to humiliate himself so thoroughly that the real king feels like royalty again. Once, a servant was forced to dress as a bishop and give a mock sermon in the hall. He said something clever. People laughed too hard, and by morning he was gone. No explanation, just silence. Then there's the plague corner. Every castle has one, usually near the edge of the courtyard. Sometimes it's a shed. Sometimes it's just a rope stretched around a tent. It's where they put the sick. And leave them. If someone inside recovers, it's called a miracle. If they die, which they usually do, they're burned. Quickly. Ashes don't spread infection, they say. Neither does fear. But you know better. You saw a kitchen maid develop a cough. She was sent there the next day. You never saw her again. But you smelled the smoke. The next morning the firewood pile was lower. Then there are the leeches. They don't live in the moat. They live in the infirmary. A room where medicine is something between faith and violence. You're bled for fevers. Purged for sadness. Whipped for possession. Once, a girl had a nightmare and screamed in her sleep. They shaved her head and tied her to the chapel door for 3 days, so the devil could exit through her breath. By the time she was let down, she didn't speak anymore. They said she was cured. Then there are the animals. They're not pets. They're not decorations. They're hazards. The Lord keeps hunting dogs that have tasted more servant flesh than venison. You walk wide circles around them. You don't run. Running triggers instinct. There's a falcon that once clawed a scribe's ear off. There's a horse with better food than you. And then, worst of all, there's the kitchen cat. It has one eye, no tail, and more authority than you. If it's on the table, you don't move it. If it's sleeping in the flour, you work around it. If it bites you, which it will, you apologise. Because the cook loves that cat more than she loves any human in the building. You've seen her cry over it. You've seen her threaten a guard for yelling near it. You've seen her name stew, so Whiskers delight in its honour. And yet, if you ask her for more bread, she'll ask if you've earned it. Absurdity isn't a mistake here. It's structure. You clean mud off the boots of a man who just stepped in pig filth on purpose because he enjoys the way it squishes. You heat water for a noble's bath while he pees into a jug you'll have to carry down 3 flights of stairs. You watch a lord talk to a painting of his grandfather before making military decisions. And if you laugh, you're the fool, not him, not ever. You once saw a knight eat a lit candle. He said it was for courage. No one said otherwise, because power makes stupidity sacred, and fear makes silence wise. Some horrors don't bleed, they smile, they wear jewels, they host dinners, they perfume their collars and speak in polite tones. But underneath, they're the same. You start to realise that violence here is seasonal. It's not a question of if someone gets hurt, it's a question of how. And how loudly they're expected to pretend it didn't happen. Take feasting. A noble feast is supposed to be joy incarnate. Food, music, wine, laughter. But it's theatre. The bread is stale by the time it reaches the lower tables. The wine has been watered down. The meat might be roasted, but it's covered in spices not for flavour, but to mask the rot. You serve, of course. You don't eat. Not unless someone throws you a scrap. Not unless you catch it in your hand before it hits the floor. And even then you glance around before chewing. Because what was generosity in one moment becomes theft in the next. Especially if a noble changes moods mid-sentence. Which they do. Often. One moment they're singing. The next they're shouting at the jester to bleed for laughter. And if he does, if he cuts his palm with a small dagger and smears it on his face to get a laugh, they'll clap and drink and forget by morning. You don't. You never do. Then there's courtly love. It's supposed to be beautiful. Poems, tokens, swooning. It's not. It's a structured madness. A knight composes a sonnet about a lady's ankles. He recites it loudly while holding a rose that's been dipped in goat's blood for dramatic effect. Everyone pretends this is normal. Meanwhile, the lady in question is 13 and would rather be anywhere else. You once saw a nobleman demand a lock of hair from a kitchen maid. She refused. He called it treason. The steward cut a braid off himself and gave it to him like a prize. The noble sniffed it, then dropped it in a fire. Romance in the castle is just power in poetry form. And like all power, it's allowed to be absurd. Take the falconer. He once spent 3 days teaching a bird to bow. Not hunt, not deliver messages. Bow. When it finally bobbed its head in the right direction, the Lord called it a symbol of divine hierarchy. You clean bird crap off the banisters for the rest of the week. Then there's the rainwater ritual. Once a month, the lady of the castle has her hair washed with rainwater that's been blessed by the priest, filtered through virgin linen, and scented with crushed violets. That sounds luxurious. Until you realise what you have to do. Climb to the roof. With buckets, in the dark. During a storm. Hold the bucket steady while lightning cracks and freezing wind threatens to shove you into the moat. Then carry the buckets down, gently, reverently, without spilling. If you spill, back to the roof. Again and again, until the lady has enough to feel renewed. You meanwhile can't feel your fingers. The priest says, this teaches discipline. You think it teaches pneumonia. But you don't say that. You just cough, quietly. Then there's noble medicine. The castle employs a physician. He's educated. He speaks Latin. He smells of clove. His robes are spotless. His treatments? not so spotless. He prescribes powdered horn for headaches, boiled eel skin for melancholy, raw onions inserted into places onions were never meant to go. You once watched him try to balance humours by feeding a baroness 6 live frogs. When she vomited, he said the cure was working. When she died, he blamed the servants. You helped carry the body. You weren't allowed to cry, because grief isn't yours. It belongs to the Lord's. When they mourn, it's poetry. When you mourn, it's unprofessional. You bottle it up, alongside your outrage, your revulsion, your questions, because those are luxuries. And you can't afford luxuries, even when you're being told that drinking molten gold is a noble death. Even when a feast ends with a man dying from choking on a necklace baked into a pie for luck. Even when a visiting lord demands the entire staff walk backward for a week because it confuses evil spirits, you obey, because laughter is disobedience, and logic is rebellion. You begin to develop a sense for absurdity, a sixth sense. You feel it coming like weather. You can tell by the way a noble's eyes glaze over when they've had too much wine, by the way a page smirks too long after being whispered something scandalous, by the way the jester tilts his head just before asking if anyone's ever kissed a pig for good luck. And you brace yourself, because someone's about to declare that Tuesdays are unlucky and ban all songs in a minor key. And someone else will nod, because they're afraid not to. And soon, there will be a rule with teeth. A rule you'll be punished for forgetting, even though everyone knows it's madness. But madness in a castle isn't a flaw. It's a function. It keeps you distracted, exhausted, busy memorising nonsense, so you don't have time to wonder why you're sleeping beside a bucket of coal while the steward's dog has its own bed. Eventually you stop noticing. And that's the scariest part. Not the blood, not the screams, not the iron devices tucked in the cellar. No. The scariest part is when it all starts to feel normal. Eventually, you begin to understand. Nothing here makes sense. Not really, it only pretends to. Rules appear like mushrooms. Overnight, sour-smelling, and lethal if handled wrong. Take the fork. One day it's banned, declared an affront to God's fingers. A week later, it's back, declared elegant by a duchess visiting from the coast. You adapt. You always adapt. Even when adapting means unlearning logic. There was a servant once. Clever girl, sharp eyes, quick feet. She dared to ask why she couldn't walk through the main courtyard on even-numbered days. The answer? There's a shadow there? That was it. A shadow. Not a person. Not a curse. Just a shadow. No one elaborated. No one questioned. She was reassigned to the latrines. You once poured hot broth clockwise instead of counterclockwise. A guard slapped the bowl from your hands. Don't insult the soup, he said. You apologised to the soup. Later, the cook thanked you. Apparently, it had been acting strange. You stopped asking questions. Even inside your own mind. That's the key to surviving absurdity. You surrender thought. You let the rules replace reason. You let custom replace choice. You let fear become instinct, sharp, automatic, and always ready to override anything that feels like common sense. Because common sense doesn't keep you safe. Compliance does. The horror of castle life isn't just the cruelty. It's the way cruelty gets disguised. Pain becomes discipline. Humiliation becomes ceremony. Torture becomes tradition. The pillory isn't a punishment, it's a public moment of reflection. The dungeon isn't retribution, it's a pause for correction. The stocks outside the chapel? A devotional prompt. You once saw a boy whipped for dropping a spoon. The priest said the blood would purify his character. The boy didn't speak for days. When he did, the first words were, "Thank you." And no one flinched, because belief here isn't just deep, it's weaponized. A girl walks backward for a week because a noble's dog barked at her shadow. A mason is forbidden from wearing blue ever again because a visiting lord had a premonition that the colour would bring famine. The bread is shaped into birds 1 week, then pigs, then nothing at all, depending on which celestial alignment the steward believes in that month. You start baking on instinct. Not because you've learned what they want, but because you've unlearned wanting anything to make sense. The jester is the most terrifying of them all, because the jester knows. He mocks the rules while enforcing them. He juggles nonsense into prophecy. He calls nobles pigs to their faces, and gets praised for wit. You envy him. He's free in ways you're not because he's braver, but because his job is to be absurd. Yours is to pretend the absurdity is normal. You once asked him, quietly, nervously, how he gets away with it. He leaned in. He whispered, "Because they don't think I mean it." Then he laughed and walked away. A week later, someone accused him of heresy for making a joke about St. Elric's hair. He danced into the chapel, threw off his cap, and kissed the altar. The accusation vanished. He survived again. You know you wouldn't, because there are rules for them, and rules for you. When a noble vomits on the table, it's called a sign of spiritual release. When a servant sneezes during Vespers, it's called an omen of pride. When a knight kills a boar with a spear, he gets a ceremony. When a boy kills a rat with a broom, he gets 3 days in the scullery with no shoes. The hierarchy isn't just vertical, it's surreal. You once saw a lord declare war on a neighbouring village because someone there spelled his name wrong in a letter. You delivered that letter. You rewrote it 4 times before the ink dried. Didn't matter. He wanted the excuse. And war, here, is just another performance. Banners. Marching. Trumpets. And then starvation, taxes, bleeding feet, more soup made from bones with no meat. While the nobles argue over who looked more regal in their armour. You want to scream. You want to laugh. But you can't do either. Because either one is suspicious. Laughter means mockery. Crying means madness. And both are punished. So you remain neutral. You become a mask. And the more you wear it, the harder it is to remember your own face. You wake one day and realise you haven't had a single original thought in weeks. You haven't dreamed. You haven't questioned. You've stopped imagining what life could be. Not because it's too painful, but because it's too absurd to picture. Freedom? Where would you even begin? What would you wear? What would you eat without checking a feast day calendar? What would you say if you weren't saying "yes, sir," or "forgive me, my lady un"? There's no script for freedom here. Only for obedience. Only for survival. Only for vanishing quietly into the machinery of castle culture, where absurdity is law, and sanity is sedition. By now the absurdity isn't shocking anymore, it's routine. You fetch hot stones for a noble's shoes, so his toes don't suffer emotional fatigue. You bless a bucket of water before it's thrown on a guest to awaken the spirits of diplomacy. You serve a banquet for a corpse, because the Baron wanted one last feast before burial, and his widow insists his soul will be offended if the roast is underseasoned. No one laughs, because laughter would imply something is strange, and nothing here is allowed to be strange. only sanctioned. Even the cruel jokes wear ceremonial robes, like the tradition where servants crawl under the high table during feasts to catch falling crumbs for luck. You've done it twice. One time you found a ring. You gave it back. You thought it might earn you thanks. Instead they accused you of stealing. You spent a night in the oubliette. You came out wet, shaking and silent. Now when you see something drop, you pretend you didn't. It's safer. Even the animals get better treatment. The falcons get gloves. The hounds get names. You get barked at. Your name, once spoken in your village like a melody, is now muttered, if spoken at all. Boy, girl, you there, hands. Even the steward, who once praised your handwriting, now only sees your back bent over ledgers. You're not a person, you're a function, a moving part, a thing that carries, lifts, obeys. And the castle somehow always finds new ways to reduce you further. There's the day of silence, when you must do your work without speaking a single word, to honour St. Velma's vow. If you sneeze, that's a fine. If you hum, that's a day without bread. If you whisper, that's lashing. Not because the silence matters, but because your voice doesn't. Then there's the mud test. Spring festival. Everyone's merry. You're told to walk across the main path barefoot. Just a silly game. The steward says, let's see who the earth chooses to bless with clean feet. The path is soaked, churned by oxen hooves and days of rain. You step in. It sucks at your ankles. By the third step, you're up to your knees. Everyone laughs, especially when you fall. They say the mud has spoken. You're unlucky. That week, you're denied all sweets. Bad luck invites gluttony. You go to bed hungry while the nobles eat tarts shaped like roses and laugh about whose shoes they ruined. The horror isn't in the pain, it's in the performance of justice. You watch as a boy is punished for stealing bread, while the steward's son brags about tossing whole loaves into the moat to feed the fish spirits. You see a maid beaten for dropping a tray, while a drunken knight hurls a pitcher at a tapestry and is applauded for fiery spirit. You understand now, justice in the castle isn't blind, it's scripted. And you're the background actor who gets stabbed for realism. You try to find small rebellions. You whisper your real name at night. You keep a pebble in your pocket because it's from your village path, and no one here can take that. You breathe slower when they expect you to rush. You think no in your head, even when you say yes, my lord. Tiny things, quiet things, but even those feel dangerous, because sanity itself feels suspicious. They want you tired, they want you hungry, they want you confused. Because people like that don't rise, they kneel. Forever. You once asked an old servant how long she's been here. She looked past you. Past the walls. She said, long enough to forget what trees sound like. You understood what she meant. You used to wake with dreams of running, not escaping, just running. A field, a road, a river. Now you don't dream at all. Or if you do, they're full of staircases, cleaning rags, echoes of commands in rooms that never end. You dream in stone. And even your sleep serves the castle. Because if you're rested, you're faster. And if you're faster, you're useful. And if you're useful, you're less likely to be replaced. That's the real threat. Not death. Replacement. To be forgotten. To vanish so quietly that your chores are picked up before your name is missed. To have your bed filled before your breath fades. You saw it once. A boy collapsed in the stables. No one knew why. By the next day, his shoes were on another boy's feet. By the next week, no one remembered he existed. Even the cat seemed confused when it returned to find someone new feeding it. The cat adjusted. So did the castle. So did you. Because horror isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's smooth. It slides in. It becomes normal. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You nod at orders you don't understand. You apologise for bleeding. And somehow you keep going. Not because you're brave, not because you're strong, but because stopping feels worse. Because stopping would mean facing the truth. This place is eating you. And you're letting it. There comes a moment, not with a scream, but a sigh, when you realise you're not leaving, not in a day, not in a year, not even in memory. You've become a part of the stone, a fixture, a shadow, a hinge that creaks only when it's needed. And the worst part, you don't fight it, because the fight is gone. Not stolen, spent. You used to think. Now you calculate. You used to feel. Now you endure. Somewhere between polishing the same stair rail for the 100th time and bowing to someone younger than you for the 4th, something snapped. Not loudly, not with drama, just a quiet internal shift, like a dropped spoon that no one hears. You stopped hoping, not in a tragic way, in a comfortable way, like setting down a heavy sack you've carried too long. Hope had weight. Expectation had teeth. Desire had consequence. Now, you have routine. And that, oddly enough, is a kind of peace. You don't dream anymore. Not because you don't sleep, but because your dreams look just like your days. You sweep the floor. You wash the stone. You carry the pot. You nod at the guard. It repeats, endlessly, predictably, painfully. And that predictability, that sameness, it becomes a blanket. Not warm, not soft, but familiar. And familiarity is the last comfort you're allowed. You no longer miss the world beyond the walls. You barely remember it. The forest path. The smell of bread not made in bulk. The sound of someone saying your name without instruction in their voice. Those things blur. You recall them like the details of a half-remembered song. The melody is there, but not the words. You tried writing once, with a bit of charcoal on a scrap of cloth. Just a name. Your name. It looks strange. Not wrong. Just foreign. You stared at it until the lines felt meaningless. Just angles. Just dust. Then you wiped it off. Not out of shame. Out of nothing. That's what you feel now. Not sadness. Not even fear. Just emptiness, but not the dramatic kind. Not the poetic void that poets write about. Just a low, a steady hum of absence. You wake, you move, you sleep. Your body goes on, and that's all that's expected of you. You become invisible on purpose. Not because you're hiding, because being seen requires effort. And effort is costly. It draws attention. And attention draws obligation. And obligation draws risk. So you nod, you smile, you lower your gaze. You fade, but efficiently. And they love you for it. The steward says you're reliable. The priest says you're devout. The cook says you're quiet. And you take it as praise. Because it means you're not being punished. Because it means no one is watching you too closely. Because it means they might forget you exist. And forgetting is mercy. You stop caring what people say. You stop asking what day it is. You stop wondering why the guard at the west gate never speaks, or why the milk has tasted like copper all week, or why the candles burn lower than usual at Vespers. You stop noticing, and what you don't notice can't hurt you. That becomes the rhythm of your life. Noticing is danger, so you train your eyes to glaze. You train your ears to drift. You train your thoughts to circle nothing. You once caught your reflection in the basin. You didn't recognise it. You tilted your head, blinked, leaned closer. It looked like someone who could vanish without changing anything. And that, oddly enough, made you feel calm. You think, once in a while, about people who tried to escape. They're gone. Some were caught, punished. Others simply disappeared. Maybe they made it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe the woods swallowed them. Maybe they became servants somewhere else. But the idea of escape no longer excites you. It exhausts you. The thought of planning, hiding, running, fearing. It sounds like too much. You'd rather rest. Not because you're lazy. Because you're done. Done struggling. Done proving. Done wishing. You've learned that the castle isn't something you escape. It's something you dissolve into. Like salt in water. Invisible, but still there. Still present. Still useful. Still obedient. You don't want revenge. You don't want justice. You don't want fairness. You want silence. And when you get it, you feel grateful. Not joyful. Not relieved. Just grateful. Because in a world where everything costs, silence is the only thing they haven't taxed yet. Not out loud. Not yet. You know they will one day. They'll find a way to charge you for stillness, to monetize your breath, to measure your size. But until then, you keep your head down. You walk softly. You speak only when spoken to. You fold your hands behind your back so no one sees them tremble. And inside, you fade. And you call that fading peace. You begin to forget what wanting felt like. Not the big wants. Not freedom, not love, not meaning. Those disappeared long ago. You forget the small wants. The taste of something sweet. The comfort of stretching in sunlight. The joy of warm water. You forget what it felt like to have a favourite sound. You don't flinch at bells anymore. You don't smile at birdsong. You don't pause when a lute plays down the corridor. It all passes through you, like wind through a broken window. You think maybe that's what you've become. Not a person, a window. You let things pass. Sound, instructions, time. You carry them from one moment to the next, you do your part, then vanish. And no one notices. Not because they're cruel, but because not noticing you is the point. They praise you when they don't remember your face. They compliment you when your presence leaves no trace. You're called seamless, smooth, unobtrusive. And these words feel like success. Because in a place like this, success means becoming invisible on command. You start to avoid mirrors. Not out of shame, out of disinterest. What would you even look for? You know your face by touch now, by habit. You clean it with cold water. You dry it with the same cloth. You pat, never scrub, because scrubbing implies you care what lies beneath. You don't. You don't care what colour your eyes are. You don't care which tooth is loose. You don't care whether the new freckle on your cheek looks like the one your mother had. You don't remember your mother's face anymore. Just her hands. The way they smelled like onions. The way they pulled twine too tight. The way they folded over yours when you asked why your brother had to go to the Lord's tax levy. She didn't answer. She just squeezed your hand. Now you understand the silence. She knew the answer would hurt more than the ignorance. Just like you do now. A child in the castle once asked you, "Were you always here?" You didn't know how to answer. You said yes, because it was easier than explaining memory, easier than describing a past you no longer claim. You feel old, not in years, in layers, like you've lived so many tiny deaths that you're now a sediment of decisions you didn't get to make. People say time heals, but here, time erases. Not all at once, but grain by grain. You forget the names of those who died. You forget why the dungeon door has a notch in it. You forget how many steps from the kitchen to the garden. Until one day you catch yourself staring at the sky, not in wonder, but confusion. You think, was it always this blue? And you panic. Because even something as simple as the sky feels foreign now. Because the only thing that's truly familiar anymore is obedience. Not just the act, the shape, the posture, the feeling in your bones when your shoulders hunch and your chin lowers and your voice says, "Yes, my lord," before your brain catches up. You are obedience now. You don't perform it. You don't resist it. You exist as it. And in a way, that's a kind of peace. Because questioning took energy. And you don't have that anymore. Your spine hurts. Your hands ache. Your thoughts barely flicker. They come and go like birds above a closed window, noticeable only when they tap the glass. But you don't open it. You just blink. Wait for them to leave. Return to sweeping. Or scrubbing. Or bowing. There's no you here. Just the movement you leave behind. You've become your task. You are laundry on the line, ash in the hearth, steam above the stew pot. There's something poetic about that. But poetry is for those with time to savour. You have time only to repeat, to recite, to comply. And the silence that used to scare you, it comforts you now. Because no words means no orders. No orders means no mistakes. No mistakes means no punishment. That's how low the bar is now. Survival equals not getting yelled at. You tell yourself this is fine. You tell yourself this is enough. And some days, it even feels true. Especially when the sun doesn't rise. Especially when the bells don't ring. Especially when no one says your name for hours. Because in that stillness you are nothing. And in this place, nothing is the safest thing you can be. It's hard to say when it happened. Maybe it was the 10th winter. Maybe it was the 100th bowl of broth. Maybe it was the morning your shoes froze and cracked, and you didn't even flinch. You stopped existing as a you. Now you are a function. They say your name and you move. They raise a hand and you act. They ring a bell and your legs respond before your mind even knows what's being asked. You're no longer obedient. You're automated. You don't think. You echo. The walls echo too. They hold sound. They hold heat. They hold secrets. You're like the walls. You absorb what is said. You reflect what is needed. You no longer store feelings. Not because you don't have them, but because they are inefficient. Sadness takes time. Anger draws attention. Joy creates desire. And desire is dangerous. You were caught once, smiling. Nothing big. Just a soft smile. The sun had landed on the floor in a perfect gold stripe, and a dog had rolled in it, like it knew the secret of happiness. "Someone saw you," they asked. "What's so funny?" You said, "Nothing." You were reassigned to the cellar. 4 weeks of damp. No light. Salt barrels and rat droppings and silence so complete you began to forget language. When they brought you back upstairs, you smiled again. Not from joy, from habit. Because even suffering, after enough repetition, feels like routine. You start to narrate your movements in your head, not because you're bored, but because it reminds you that you exist. Left foot, right foot. Turn the corner. Hands behind back. Don't breathe too loud. It becomes a lullaby. You begin to speak to objects. Not often, not loud, just a whisper. You say thank you to the broom. Sorry to the spilled flour. Almost done to the pot. You don't expect them to answer. But it's easier than talking to people. People come with risk. objects stay where you left them. You envy the objects. The brush never gets whipped. The door never has to kneel. The spoon isn't expected to smile. You start to wonder what you would be if you were an object. Not a candle. Too visible. Not a window. Too fragile. Maybe a hinge. Small, rusty, useful. Quiet. Something that squeaks when forgotten, but holds weight without complaint. That feels right. You try to think of the last time someone looked you in the eyes. Really looked. Not scanned. Not barked at. Not ordered. Looked. Saw you. You can't remember. You don't hold that against them. Because you don't look at yourself anymore either. You used to trace the lines on your hands. You used to think, these are mine. Now they feel like borrowed tools. They scrub and pour and slice and carry. But they don't gesture. They don't reach. They don't hold. Once, you brushed against another servant's fingers while passing a ladle. The touch shocked you. Not because it was electric. Because it reminded you that touch was still possible. And you hated that reminder. You pull back now. Always, not from disgust. From self-preservation. Because touch invites memory. And memory invites hope. And hope is not allowed here. Hope makes you restless. Hope makes you careless. Hope makes you visible. And you've worked too hard to become background. It's safer this way. To be the blur. The quiet. The shadow. Even your breathing has adapted. You no longer take deep breaths. You sip air like it's rationed. Because in this world, even oxygen feels like a borrowed favour. You once saw a new girl arrive, bright-eyed, full of questions. She asked why we don't sing while we work. Someone said, because song is a luxury. She tried anyway. She hummed, soft, beautiful. Not defiant, just alive. Within 2 hours she was sent to the outhouse trench. She came back gagging. She hasn't made a sound since. You didn't speak to her. But you nodded, and she nodded back. That nod said everything. Now you understand. You don't need words anymore. You speak in movement. You speak in stillness. You speak by not speaking. And the fewer words you use, the safer you feel. You begin to forget what your voice sounds like. You try it once, late at night, alone. You whisper your name. It sounds fake, like something you read in a story long ago. You say it again. It echoes too loud. You never say it again. Not because it hurts, because it means nothing. You are not that name. You are this role. You are the motion between tasks. You are the weight of silence in a room that should be noisy. You are absence made efficient. And somehow you survive. Because fading is easier than burning. Because numbness is lighter than pain. Because nothing, finally, feels like rest. You don't know how long it's been, not days, not seasons. Time in the castle doesn't move forward. It settles, like dust. It coats everything. Your skin, your breath, your thoughts. And you stop brushing it away. Because what's the point? There's nothing beneath it anymore. You're not tired now. Tired implies you can rest. You're beyond tired. You're erased. And erasure, you've learned, is the most stable state. Because nothing can be taken from you when you have nothing left. You've given it all. Your energy, your words, your name, your hunger, your laughter, your fear. You don't even flinch anymore. A plate crashes beside you. You don't blink. A guard yells. You stay still. You're not calm. You're emptied. You still move. You still eat. You still breathe. But these things are functions, not choices, not actions. Just do what the body does when the spirit has gone quiet. You do not cry. Not because you're brave, because there's nothing left to grieve. Grief requires memory. and memory hurts. So you've stopped remembering. Your mother's lullaby? Gone. Your favourite smell? Gone. The joke your brother told before leaving for Levy? Gone. You don't even know if he came back. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Because knowing would reignite something. And fire here gets you noticed. And being noticed gets you punished. And punishment reminds you that pain is still possible. And you've worked so hard to become someone who no longer feels. It's the only form of peace the castle offers. And you've accepted it. No, more than that. You've absorbed it. You wake and don't count the steps to the basin. You work and don't measure time by task. You lie down and don't dream. You close your eyes and don't hope. And in that blankness, in that narrow silence between one command and the next, you find stability. Not happiness, not safety, not love, just stability. The routine doesn't betray you. The orders don't lie. The rules don't surprise. They hurt, yes, but pain, when predictable, becomes bearable, and anything bearable you've learned can become home. The castle is not your prison. It is not your tormentor. It is not even your god. The castle is your mirror. It reflects what you've become. And what you've become is nothing, but not in the tragic way. Not in the poetic, candle blown out in the night way. You've become nothing in the same way as shadow becomes part of the wall, present, silent, unquestioned. And if someone points to it and asks, "What is that?" the answer is simple. That's always been there. You have always been here. You are part of the stairs, part of the floor, part of the air that thickens with the soup steam and returns to stillness. They will bury you one day, not because you died, but because your body finally caught up with your absence. And even then, you will not be mourned, because no one remembers what wasn't seen. No one praises a door that opens on command. No one grieves a candle that burns quietly. They will say, "We'll need a new one," and they will mean a new you, a new vessel, a new routine, a new silence, because you, in the end, were replaceable by design. And that knowledge, it doesn't hurt anymore. It frees you from needing to be special, from craving meaning, from resisting the script. You have become what the castle rewards, a body that functions, a voice that obeys, a soul that does not complain. You are the end of wanting, and in that, finally, you rest. The fire dies in the hearth, the footsteps stop in the hall. The castle exhales and forgets your name. There's no lesson here, no call to arms, no promise of freedom, just stone and silence, and you, still breathing, still fading, still here. Good night.